virtually. Again, so this is a meeting the public are invited to. Don't believe there's any of the public attending at this meeting, but it's recorded so that the public can get access at a later date. Just to welcome Adrian Clark to his first meeting as interim Director of Mental Health and Vulnerable Groups. Welcome. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. And looking forward to your report shortly. So thank you very much for that. But I'm going to seek the committee's support to bring two items forward. Yolo is chairing another meeting imminently, and so with your support, I'd like to bring forward the IPFR item and the Blue Tech report, so Yolo can present those reports before he needs to leave. So I hope that's acceptable to everybody. That I was expecting. Rachel, do you know if Jason's joined us today, or are you Jason?
He was due to attend, so I'm going to give. He's got to travel for an inquest, which he has now got to attend in person later today rather than virtually. So he's travelling, unfortunately, this morning. So he gives his apologies.
No problem. So just to note, and our congratulations to Jason on his appointment as Chief Executive of the London Ambulance Service, and to thank him for his support for the NHS in Wales in his current role. If you can pass that back on to him, I'll drop him a note as well, Rachel. Thank you.
I will certainly do. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I know that Nicola needs to pop out at about 10:30. He'll be coming back to us, and Suzanne needs to leave at 11 o'clock. And I also believe Carol will be joining us at 10:30. So a bit of musical chairs with our Chief Exec colleague, but we remain for it. Apologies for absence. So Hugh sends his apologies. He's on annual leave and was on annual leave before he was appointed as interim Chief Commissioner, but Stacey is ably standing in today. And Mel Wilkie has also sent apologies. Any other apologies?
No further.
Any other apologies for absence? No. Let's move on then to declarations of interest.
Yeah, just to say on item 4.2.3, the IPFR, I am a lay member of an OM IPFR panel.
Thank you. And I have a declaration of interest, a change in my declarations of interest, because as of the 1st of July, I will no longer be chair of Salisbury NHS Foundation Trust, but as of the 1st of July, I'll be chair of Shropshire ICB on scenes. Thank you very much. Any other declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of March have been circulated. Can we agree them as a correct record? Any issues in terms of action? No, then they are approved, and I'll sign a copy later. Let's move on then to the action log, Jackie.
You Chair. Just to confirm, GCC 2458 concerning ambulance performance. The Cabinet Secretary made an oral statement in March, and a further update is provided under the Director of Commissioning for Ambulance 111 report, item 2.4 on the agenda. So that action is completed, the committee are asked to agree that that be closed. In relation to action 62 relating to the risk register, this is not yet due, but just to give you an assurance that a deep dive on ambulance performance and capacity is included on the agenda for the Quality, Safety and Outcomes Subcommittee scheduled for the 2nd of June, and this action will be closed after that has taken place. In relation to number 75, in relation to secure public health expertise, there's a verbal update provided today, so I'll pass to George to give us an update.
George.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this is one of our strategic priorities in the foundation plan, and Yolo is the JCC lead and liaising with Public Health Wales to make sure that we have got that secured public health input. So I don't know if Yolo wants to add to that to update us, but it is being taken forward as part of that foundation.
Hello.
Yes, it's been agreed that there's a requirement for at least a 0.5 whole-time equivalent associate medical director. So we're in the process of finalising the job description, and that will hopefully go out imminently.
Yola, do we have a timescale for that?
I would hope to be able to give you at the next meeting, we should hopefully be out for advert and hopefully close to appointment.
Because it's obviously been so outstanding for some time, but it's really good that we've actually got that now in train, Abby.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good news, because clearly in terms of development of the strategy, starting with the needs assessment approach to it would be really critical. A cheeky question, is this going to be part of Public Health Wales's contribution to this, or is this something that we will need you might not want to answer it here, but because I guess there is a question for us all around where the national bodies are supporting or the National Trust supporting organisations right across the board, but you might want to pick it up outside. I appreciate it. Come back to it.
Okay. Thank you very much, but it's important that's been flagged. Okay, so that's that item done.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Item 76 in relation to SARG is not yet due. The second element of that relates to gender. That was discussed at the strategy workshop in April. So that grade is completed. If members agree.
Sorry, Suzanne.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. No, I don't think that completes the action, if I'm honest. I was just checking the minutes again. I don't recall us having a deep dive into the gender services and assurance on the provision of services to children and young people through the contract with NHS England. So I don't think we have completed that action. In the minutes, it says it will be for April 25, which clearly we're now in May. So
I agree with you, Suzanne. I think that the conversation I recall having at the last meeting is that we would try and create some space at our development
Right.
day and a bit of a debate, and we didn't. And so we do need to make sure that we are creating further opportunity to undertake some work around gender services, and I think that was a bit more to be made. So, Adrian, I wonder where we might take that forward.
Yeah, I thought we were having a separate deep dive on
That was my understanding. Yeah. Okay, so that clearly is not then proposed. We'll keep that one open and we'll build that into our forward plan. Karen.
In addition to that, Suzanne, which may be helpful, is that we have invited the Bristol service to come and do a presentation to the Quality, Safety and Outcome Committee. So I think they're not coming this time, but they come in the week after. So we'd be able to also bring that part of that back into that deep dive as well.
I think it's therefore really important that we hear from colleagues from the Cardiff service as well, and that's built in so that we are.
Yeah. I'm
conscious of the sensitivity, which I want to. I'm conscious we're in a public forum, but Suzanne, I think we just need to be thinking about the choreography of that to make sure that there is an alignment.
yes, I think there's two key things really. How and so whether in Bristol obviously will have a perspective on this, but I think for the committee we've commissioned a service, and what I'd like to know is how effectively is that service operating? Are we, and whatever KPIs were set, are they being achieved? What is the experience of our children and young people through that service, and whether or not the service is demonstrating value for money? And I think we do need to ask ourselves those questions. So whatever means we need to do that. And then I think you're right, Chair, there is a conversation with the adult team, because if you recall, and as it's described in the minutes, there's concern around how to manage those children and families who are accessing gender blocking medication privately, but we don't have really. I don't have the expertise to make an assessment, but I'm concerned that we're then we don't really have a means of supporting those children and young people having access to that medication.
Can I, Nia, and then I'll make a suggestion how we might take this forward.
Yes, and I think you've alluded to it. This matter has become more sensitive, and the people who are involved are, I guess, feeling more, more sensitive. So it's even more important, I think, than it was before through recent developments.
Can I make a suggestion that within the next sort of 10 days or so, that, and again, Suzanne, it might be that you and I may want to have a bit of an involvement in this, work with agents to do a bit of scoping around what that deep dive should cover and what it should look like. And then make sure as well there's it may be that the conversations with Bristol are distinct and separate around the current quality, but I think it's important that we're clear in terms of what our expectations are as a JCC, and then we can try to ensure that we build that in to our work plan soon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy with that.
And it will also be Alder Hay, who is the provider for North Wales. So that our North Wales patients access to it.
Phil?
I was just thinking about the Bristol service attending quality safety committee and maybe Alder Hay, I think you mentioned then. I wondered, I suppose, perhaps in your conversation with Suzanne, Chair, it'd be important to think about with Carol what we might be asking those services to do when they come and present, because there could be a number of ways they approach that presentation. And also mindful that we are not experts on that quality safety committee. But we are trying to oversee general quality and safety, of course.
Let's do a bit of stepping back from this and have some separate conversations, which will then socialise with the rest of the JCC, just to think about what's the most important, one of the most important issues that we would want to see from a deep dive, and when would it be appropriate to engage with the current providers and in what context. And that might be, I think, the best way forward. But thank you for flagging that, Suzanne, because I clocked that as well, because I don't think that was an accurate reflection in the action log. Great, thank you very much. Sorry, carry on.
Okay, thanks all. Just to give an assurance, we'll update that action to reflect what you've just described and ensure that's progressed. In terms of the next action, it relates to occupancy of beds. That information has been circulated and it's suggested that that action is now completed. In relation to action 77 relating to Swan, the Swan business case information has been shared with colleagues and that's categorised as completed. And also the future of the Swan service was discussed at the Collaborative Commissioning Leadership Group meeting on the 29th of April, and there is an update on the agenda as well today for colleagues. So that action is categorised as completed. And the action 77 in relation to an urgent piece of work on scan capacity, an update is provided under item 2.5 on the agenda. So that's categorised as completed. And finally, continuing healthcare programme, an update on that action is under item 2.6 on the agenda.
So a large number of items are proposed to be closed from this action log because they're contained on the agenda today. Thank you very much. Any further comments? Then can we move forward on the agenda then to the IPFR panel terms of reference? And Yolo, presume that we've read the report, but anything else you in particular wish to highlight to us?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
So presume that we've read the report. Is there anything you wish to highlight to us as you introduce the report?
I'm sorry, I missed which report we were referring to.
The IPFR report, sorry.
Oh, yes, right, yes. So the IPFR report, this has had a long gestation. This resulted as following a judicial review, a successful judicial review, questioning a decision made by the WISC as was IPFR panel. And the defence lawyer and the judge highlighted inconsistencies within the wording of the policy. Subsequently, Welsh Government and CPO asked WISC to undertake a de minimis review of the IPFR policy from 2017. They didn't want to change the philosophy, but they wanted to get the wording correct. So David Locke QC, as he was, David Locke Casey, High Court judge, was asked to revise the wording. And that was proposed and taken to a meeting, a stakeholder engagement meeting in 2022. There were changes made, which I think in retrospect were perhaps not helpful to David Locke wording. And subsequently, there was still some confusion. And so we convened a meeting of all the IPFR chairs, the Quality Assurance Group, the Policy Implementation Group, and Welsh Government. Welsh Government in the interim wanted some changes made because there was potential conflict with the Putting Things Right policy. And so following a series of iterations, a final draft was assembled. That went to Welsh Legal, who wanted some of David Locke's other proposals put in, and that was sent out to the health boards. All but one were happy. One health board had some concerns, but they have now been resolved. And so my understanding at present is that all health boards are happy with this proposal. The medical directors have all seen it and they're happy. And so if JCC are happy, it would then go to the health boards for individual health board approval, and we would forward it to Welsh Government for knowledge.
Thanks, Yola. And so this is purely the terms of reference of the panel. There's a broader question, I think, that we've flagged for in terms of criteria. That my understanding that's a separate conversation that still needs to be had. This is about purely the approach that is taken to running the panel.
No, sorry, Ian. No, this includes the criteria. This is everything. This should be the policy for Wales now. So there were changes to the terms of reference for the JCC panel, and the JCC panel has been basically working to those terms of reference already. But this confirms all the changes.
All right, thank you very much. And it's gone through the standard approval processes within each health board, and an officer level has yet to go formally to the health boards themselves. Great. Questions or observations for anybody? Yeah.
Thanks, Yola. That's a helpful report as well. And as you say, it's been a sort of long and iterative process on this one. Having a read through the policy, are there any areas that you have issues with or concerns about?
I think if I was looking back, I think David Locke made some recommendations. One of the recommendations was that he didn't feel that IPFR should be changing policy directly. And he put in a caveat that IPFR decisions shouldn't change policy. That was removed by the policy implementation group, and you could argue that might be helpful. And the second thing, I think if you speak to clinicians, they all express extreme frustration with how unhelpful the form is. And I think a revision of the form would be very helpful for everyone.
That's helpful. Thanks, Yola.
Paul?
Yeah, thanks for this. And I think, Yola, I know that our representative was involved from our side raising some queries about this. And I just want to be really certain that I've understood what's described now, because I know we've had some internal discussions. So if a request comes, do we no longer need to show that the person has a different need to any other patient? Is that correct from my reading of the?
No, I think, and this is the important thing that David Locke kept emphasising. So if there is a policy or there is nice guidance, you need 3 criteria. Is the patient significantly different to others with the same condition? And will the patient gain significant more benefit? And does it offer value for money? But if there is no policy at all, and the NICE have never said anything. So these are patients where there is nothing at all. It is illogical then to say, how are they different to other patients? So that's why there are only 2 criteria there. Will the patient gain significantly more clinical benefit? And does the intervention offer more money? And that's actually where David Locke said he didn't feel there should be an extra criteria saying it shouldn't change policy. And that's the one important thing. And I know from a JCC perspective, we're very clear that we wouldn't allow it to change policy. But so that is the difference if there is policy or NICE guidance.
Yeah, I suppose that the reality then is it could be a very, very novel treatment that has not even been through NICE, or very, very specialist treatment. So what this is telling me, just playing through a scenario, is that actually what we just have to show is that the clinician could prove that there was benefit and that there was a value for money.
Benefit compared to conventional treatment, and there's value for money. And I think it's important that certainly my experience with the JCC committee is they're very questioning and stringent on the evidence produced, because if there's clear evidence of benefit and it offers value, that's very different to something experimental at high cost.
Yeah. I suppose it's just that it's that point, isn't it, about just making sure that we don't open up a door for things to come through this route when they're very novel treatments that people perhaps haven't been able to get through other routes, perhaps their individual organisation or whatever. So I think we just need to make sure we've got those, as you say, that the committee is really cited on that. And my second point was, and I know it sounds a bit of left field perhaps, but I just wondered whether, given the value for money question, the panel composition is very rightly clinically driven, but there isn't anybody from a sort of a commissioning or a finance perspective on that group. So I did wonder whether there should be somebody who's able to provide professional sort of assessment on, because again, it's just making sure we've got that balance of the clinical views and perspectives on it versus the sort of cost, because these are very, very expensive treatments, and often, and they can be, talking about our financial plan for the year and things in specialist commissioning. I just wonder where we put that sort of challenge in from a commissioning and financial perspective.
So I think it's from a value perspective, and I think it's working out. I think from a value perspective, you would argue that being a health economist there is better, because if your ISAs are going to be off the scale, something that NICE wouldn't approve, for example, you shouldn't be considering it anyway. And I think some of these medicines are high cost, but actually some of them are very low cost. Under the rules, even if it's something for £1,000, it would still come to committee and would still go through the same rigorous process. The health board terms of reference are that I think they're all clinicians, and so WISC as was and JCC were keen that the membership paralleled or mirrored what the health board had.
I'll bring Nia in and come back to you, Paul, if you wish to.
Yeah, I just wanted to check, when you're talking about creating policy, what you mean is exactly what Paul said about opening the door. If you've approved a particular treatment and it comes up again, what the council was saying was you need a safeguard that just having said yes once doesn't mean you'll say yes every time. Is that what you meant?
Yes, and I can think of one example where there was an application put in for a quite expensive drug, which if we'd opened the floodgates, because the grounds for the application were really poor, but if we'd submitted, you could see that other people would submit. So I think there needs to be, if you were having one thing, it would be some sort of check to say just one case doesn't make a policy.
Paul, did you want to come back on Karen?
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, the panel will always ask for evidence in terms of that all conventional treatments on a pathway have been exhausted in the first instance. They will also ask for that as part of the evidence for the submission of application.
Any other comments or observations anyone wishes to make? Are we happy then to, Abby?
Just having sat through the panel when I was here, the other bit that always felt difficult was knowing the outcome and what happened, because in terms of investment and money, this was quite often sort of the final option and course for somebody, and quite often high cost. And there is something about collectively looking back and going, did it actually give the benefit? And I know that's a decision that clinicians have to make, but there is something about us knowing in terms of the look back. And this sounds awful, but the value for money and the cost benefit for the patient and individual going through a treatment that's potentially quite tricky for an individual, did it give us the collective value and feedback? And I don't know how that mechanism works in terms of reviewing that case by case and sort of having an overview of that, how we would capture that.
Suzanne, Phil, Paul, Nicola, Shimi.
No, thank you, Chair. I mean, I may well be exposing my ignorance here, but I suppose Paul's point is that it often drives in unknown cost into the overall challenge of operating the financial envelope of the health boards. And there doesn't appear to be any financial authorization. So whether we can affordability doesn't seem to be considered, I suppose, is the point I'm making. And I think, Paul, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe partly the point you're making similarly is, so it sort of pops up and you think, oh my goodness, we didn't know that was coming. So if there is some way of generating some sort of insight report or some sort of regular, and maybe that happens and I just don't see it, and it's just my own poor practice that I haven't tracked that information down. But something that can help us understand what the financial impact coming. I think clearly Abby's suggestion around a longer term evaluation of benefit realisation and impact is really also very helpful.
Thank you. And Phil.
Yeah, my point was probably on similar lines. I wondered, following up on Paul's point, I was trying to find the constitution of the panel, because I think Yolo, your suggestion was that there wasn't someone from finance or a health economist on the panel. I was just trying to work out how that assessment of public value actually happens, because it's not a precise science, that. And then also how that evaluation might take place that Abby and Suzanne are sort of suggesting.
Yolo, do you want to come back in on those 2 points?
I think they're sorry. I think these are. I think Abby's point is very well made, and I suppose extends what Paul has said. I think certainly I can only speak for JCC's panel, but often people will say there's good evidence for this. We should give it a try, and it will be approved for 2 months, and you get 2 months treatment. And if there is clinical, proven clinical benefit, it's then be reconsidered. But if there's no benefit, you should be stopping it. It's very simple, clear.
And Yolo, that broader health economics affordability issue, balancing clinical benefit against cost. How is that assessment made within the panel?
I think it's also important to say that so I can only speak for my experience of the JCC IPFR panel, but usually being considered would be opportunity cost, because often the application is for something that will perhaps cost a bit more, but gives significant benefit compared to the conventional treatment. And so I think the panel often has to make a value judgment based on how much it's going to cost and how much extra it's going to cost. And so just looking at the cost in isolation may not necessarily be appropriate. But I think we were keen that when we rewrote this, that there should be consideration of ISAs, because that would be because if the ISAs are bad, no matter how cheap or how expensive it is, you shouldn't be doing it.
Thanks. I'll bring Stacey on that point.
Yeah, I just wanted to probably pass a little bit of experience on from sitting on the panels too. They are incredibly difficult decisions to be making, and some of these questions are really difficult ones. So as an accountant sat on those panels, largely having a really strict policy criteria around the clinical decision is really important. The benefit realisation point, and coming back to that, is where you can demonstrate some of the more tricky questions around value for money, because in the true definition of value for money, a patient care context, in some of these really extreme cases, is quite a tricky one from a JCC perspective. But and the chair will consistently ask the question around, do we demonstrate, and can this be deliverable and achieved? It doesn't necessarily always have to be discussed at the panel. I think it's about the input to the application before it gets to the panel, and that's where sort of the financial conversations happen.
I mean, there's some really interesting conversations that are taking place, which I don't want to stop, but I'm also wondering whether there's an opportunity for us to have some further conversations about broadly, in a broad sense, around IPFR, having approved these terms of reference. I think that there is a real need, I think, to have clarity in terms of our current practice and by the approval of these terms of reference. But then it may well be that actually we want to have a broader conversation around the JCC table about how we want this to develop in the future. And making sure that, again, there's that alignment to the individual health boards. But I'll take another couple of comments, but that's just perhaps a suggestion in terms of how we might want to take this forward. I've got Paul, Nicola, Shameen and Carol.
Yeah, only quickly, thank you, Chair. Just feeding on what both Abby said and Yolo about benefits realisation. And as my experience as a lay member of the panel, sometimes we're approving something for maybe 3 months or even 6 months. And when it comes back, you get an indication of how well it's worked or not. And that in itself is quite useful. But it's only for a limited number of cases that you actually see that. So the ability to reflect on that benefit realisation and impact, I think, is a good issue to raise.
Only briefly, I'm picking up all those points, and sorry if we do that, but an annual report on IPFR, maybe a mid-year. It would be really helpful just for us to see the volume, the type of cases, and that would fit into at the right time an evaluation, the outcome of last year's, I don't know, But that would be really helpful and probably avoid this and should be part of the terms of reference.
Thank you. Shimeen.
I didn't see anywhere about boundaries around upper limits, time limits. I didn't know that.
I was just going to say, I think there is an annual report currently that's done on all Wales level for the IPFR cases, so we'll just make sure that that's shared and make sure that colleagues are cited on it too.
EAWTTC.
And to Shimeen's point in terms of are there any boundaries? I guess in terms of the pure nature of the IPFR, there aren't. It's about clinical benefits. So that's one of the challenges, I guess.
Yeah.
Suzanne and then Yola, then we'll pull this to a conclusion.
As a legacy hand, I'll pop it down, Chair.
No problem, Suzanne. Yola, any final observation before we
yes, just to reiterate that there is an All Wales report on IPFR from AWTTC, but separately, JCC does an annual report which is circulated, is the first thing. And secondly, there are financial limitations, obviously, because there are limits on what JCC can sign off without going to, I think it's Paul that has to sign off the really high cost.
So that's really helpful. And I think that there's nothing stopping us, so they're bringing a 6-monthly report, which we can just do as a matter.
It is there, then
Can I ask then that we approve the terms of reference? I also want to take a further action that we, and perhaps Yola, you can give some thought to this, about there's clearly some issues and questions about how the panel operates and how the JCC is cited on that, to then come back to perhaps a development session sometime later in the year, so we can have that broader conversation. But subject to, are we happy to agree the terms of reference and that action? Great, thank you very much, that's approved. And sorry we've kept you going, but briefly on to your other item, which was in relation to the BlueTech electronic prior approval system.
Yes, thank you. So BlueTech is a prior approval system for high cost drugs, particularly in NHS Wales. So WISC was asked by Welsh Government in 2018 to use BlueTech. WISC had really no option but to go for BlueTech. So many of the really high cost drugs for which there are managed access agreements with rebates were dependent on data being put into BlueTech. So WISC had no real option but to do that. And since WISC became JCC, we've continued, and all new medicines that WISC or JCC have commissioned since 2021 have gone on the BlueTech system. And that allows audit to ensure that only the patients who should be getting the drug are receiving the drug, and the BlueTech form is very straightforward to complete. It's basically name, patient, some demographic details, and usually it's taken directly from the NICE guidance. So most of these are NICE guided medicines, and it will say, do they have condition A? Are they less than 16, for example? And if you tick those two boxes, you can then prescribe, and it takes away the need for prior approval. Increasingly, this is very important because you're having indication-based pricing. So a drug like pembrolizumab, which is used extensively for a number of different cancer conditions, but the benefit of pembrolizumab may be completely different, say, in colorectal cancer versus lung cancer. As a result, the ICEs are different, and so the amount NICE says worth paying for is different. So pembrolizumab, you may pay a different price for a patient with colorectal versus lung cancer. And so if you're claiming the rebate, it is crucial that you have the BlueTech system. The BlueTech license was up for renewal in April. BlueTech are aware that we hadn't renewed the license, but from a business continuity point of view, it is important that we continue. NHSE are going through the process of looking at, are there other options, because the whole system is up for renewal in a year's time. My understanding is that they will probably go for BlueTech again. So in the interim, we are asking for to extend the license for a year, and it is likely that we will need to follow whatever NHS England procure in a year's time. To note that many of you, the health boards are now using BlueTech, and that's being rolled out, and it's the JCC hold the license on behalf of the health boards as well.
Right, thank you. So this is just providing us with information, acknowledging that there may be some further change over the course of the next 12 months. Any questions or observations? Sounds very sensible. We're happy to note the report. Great, thank you very much, Yolo.
Thank you.
Go back onto our agenda now. I'm then on to learning from patient experience. Adrian, I'm going to hand over to you first of all, if that's okay, and then I think we've got a short video, and then a colleague from Swansea Bay is going to be available to answer any questions. So over to you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's actually a soundbite of a video from the QSOC meeting. So it's the patient's experience of her being admitted to the mother and baby unit in Tonner. So Jess was there for approximately 5.5 months after the birth of her second child. And she's just talking. So we've cut out all our questions from the QSOC, and it's just her experience of being on the unit. So it's about a 6-minute soundbite, if you like. So, and we've got Anita. Anita Rees is the service manager from the mother and baby unit in Tonner. So if you've got any questions that I can answer, she'll be able to. Thank you.
To Tonner Mother and Baby Unit back in April of last year, because I had quite severe postpartum depression, and it came to the point where we tried to work with professionals at home, and nothing seemed to be working, and the perinatal team ultimately decided it was in my best interest to admit me to the unit. Yeah, I was in for nearly 6 months, 5.5 months. When I went in, I was petrified, to be honest. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know anyone. I was a long way away from home. You know, I wasn't, you know, I had Alice with me, thankfully, which I think also played a huge part in my recovery. Ultimately, I think if I'd been separated from Alice as well as my older child, I think that would have had a detrimental effect, you know, on me. When I got there, the staff were absolutely amazing. They put my mind at ease. Yeah, and they were absolutely just 100% supportive. I very often thought that they were going to think that I wasn't that bad and I didn't need to be there, but they constantly reassured me and told me that, you know, I was more than welcome to be there, and you know, and the support I received was just absolutely amazing. And also, you know, I was given the opportunity as well to, you know, use services that I wouldn't, you know, normally be able to use, therapy, VIG, things like that, which also really, you know, ultimately led to my recovery, thankfully. I also had the very unique experience of being the first physically disabled mum to be treated on the unit, which ultimately led to a few challenges on the way, but all in all, you know, we worked together, and you know, the staff, you know, listened to me, and they were just amazingly supportive of me. And yeah, it was ultimately, I do feel that, you know, without them, I wouldn't be here now. Visiting, you know, very lucky in the way that, you know, John, my partner, obviously you know, I did leave John and Ava, my eldest, at home. And you know, it was very important for me, like, as you know, me and John as well, that Ava had as much, you know, as much sort of time to visit as possible, and that they could come up as much as they possibly could. But John doesn't drive, which you know, was an obstacle in itself, which meant that, you know, they'd have to use public transport to come up. You know, the staff were really accommodating in the way that, you know, they were, you know, they said from the beginning that they could come up, you know, anytime. But the ultimate issue that we had sort of really was financially. You know, I was obviously away from home, which meant that John then had to drop down to part-time hours in work to look after Ava, which then meant that he wasn't getting as much money in. And ultimately it was the cost really that was the big issue. He only told me after I was discharged that he was paying over £100 a week to come and visit, which, you know, which meant then that, you know, he was struggling. Like I was unaware of any of this. You know, he didn't tell me at the time, but, you know, ultimately it meant that he was struggling to, you know, afford the basic things, you know, food and things like that. And it was, you know, it was, yeah, it was difficult. You know, it was a good 2 hour train journey, you know, up to Tonner, each way. And yeah, it was quite challenging for Ava as well, I'd say. In you know, having to do such a long journey, it was difficult for her as well. But ultimately, you know, the staff helped us as much as they possibly could. You know, they accommodated us, you know, amazingly. And, you know, there is the family room, which, you know, they did used to come up, you know, every weekend and stay in the family room so that we had, you know, overnight visits as well.
That's good.
Which also meant that Alice could also go over to the family room to be with Dawn and Ava as well, which I felt was very, very important.
Thank you very much. Anita, is there anything you wish to add, having when we've heard this really powerful observation from a former patient?
Nothing sort of to add to Jess's story, but I suppose just to add some context. We weren't made aware initially assessment of needs of carer, so for Jess's partner, about the significant financial burden they were experiencing. I think it took a while for that rapport and relationship to build in the trust from her partner to disclose some of that. I think he carried the weight of it quite heavily for quite some time privately. But once we were aware of it, there was quite a significant piece of work undertaken by the unit social worker to ensure they were accessing all of the appropriate financial support that they could be. And actually, by the end of the admission, their financial position and their ongoing financial position after discharge was quite significantly improved by some of the support and help that she was able to access that they hadn't been aware that they could access previously. So I think there was a learning point for us in there that we might need to keep asking families about their wider situation and the carer needs. You know, asking at admission and somebody saying things are fine and just focus on my partner, fine. I think it was a reminder to us that we need to keep asking that question, and we've actually implemented a partner significant other support pathway more formally since then, so that partners will be allocated an individual named person during the admission to try and help build that rapport a bit more readily, rather than speaking to different members of staff each time and it being a bit ad hoc about how often we ask after admission. We've also included it as part of our standard discharge planning pathway to re-go and look and ask more formally about carers' needs assessments and financial the detail of financial needs. So I think probably some improvements and some learning were taken from Jess and John's experience. And definitely some learning for us around some of the limitations of the environment. Currently, it was obviously a refurbished unit. We knew there were going to be compromises. We do have an accessible bedroom that was designed as an accessible bedroom. But I think even within Jess's admission, we realised there were still limitations to the physical environment for Jess. She had quite a lot of large equipment, and things like our anti-ligature beds are fixed in place. So it couldn't be moved to accommodate the side of the bed that Jess needed to be able to get in and out of. So there was a lot of work. I've got to say, Jess was very, very generous with us in terms of, despite her really challenging mental state, she was very generous in helping the staff to understand and leading some of the things that we needed to understand and know about how we supported her mobility and her independence, because she was the expert in her own needs, and she worked with us around our physio. What we did realise is we don't have any formal physio input into the unit. And that's been identified as something potentially for future need. We were lucky that there was an interested physio in the health board who spared some time to help us do some of those initial assessments and try and get some of the equipment and adaptations that were needed very quickly. So I think that was just some extra context.
Thank you very much for your help. A couple of comments. I've got Carol, I've got Mandy, I've got Shanine.
Yeah, I think bringing this patient story was initially as part of a review of a new service in Tonner, but what we soon found out that it taught us an awful lot in terms of the commissioning of a service from a patient perspective, and there's an awful lot of learning that has taken place as a result of the story, from changes from doing the evaluation from a financial perspective, as Anita's just described. And I know that one other issue that she raised was the fact that she would have liked to have had been able to look around the unit beforehand. So Adrian has now commissioned a video of that unit, so that it's online and that people can see the unit. We were hoping to bring some photos of Jess and the baby and the family in the unit, but unfortunately we haven't been able to do that. So it just shows at the moment just the stills of the unit. But Jess has given permission in terms of telling that story and how important it is that we do listen to the patient's voice.
Thank you, Mandy.
Yeah, I think my comments follow on from that, because obviously I was chairing that particular meeting, and it was a powerful story. I think for me, there's much broader, rather than this just being about the mother and baby unit, actually from a commissioning perspective of all and any services. So the accessibility of all of our services is a really key point for us to consider physical disability wherever, not just mental health services. The preparing patients and the information that's available for patients whenever they're going into any service, regardless of what it is again really important. We seem to think that everybody is digital. Not everybody who uses services is digitally orientated. So I think that gives us something that we need to think about. The carers need assessment. I'm afraid I think that should be standard and should be well embedded for anybody going into any service. I thought it was mandated that we work with service users and carers around the carers needs assessment. And I think that the sad thing for me in this particular story was that nobody thought to check, given the mileage and distance that a family were having to travel with a young person. But if you turn that on its head and think about how we move towards increasingly specialist centres for services, people are going to have to travel. And I think we've talked about this, particularly in the context of ambulance provision, getting people to their appointments, making sure the timing of appointments, making sure that transport is available. And if they haven't got transport, that we can signpost them to the appropriate benefit. So a bit of a rant, but I feel quite passionately about it in terms of how we go about commissioning services for the future.
Shamim, then Abby, then I'll bring Anita back in, and then Adrian, you can sum up at the end.
I was just going to say what Mandy said about learning for the wider kind of work that we do. Not only about physical accessibility, but also people with learning disabilities, and the CAMS units, especially when young people's families are travelling long ways, and kind of what financial support is available to them. So exactly what Mandy's going to say, and to Anita to say, it's really lovely to hear about all the learning that you've done, and then that actions that you've taken.
Abby, and then I'll come back to Anita.
Thank you, Ian. I didn't know this was coming as a patient story, so it's very lovely to see you, and lovely to see you, Anita. It's a service that I have visited several times and prioritised in terms of at the time I've been in the health board. And as Anita has alluded to, we have shoehorned this service into a physical environment that is not purpose-built. And this is a service that really should be a purpose-built environment. And I have to say, Anita and the team have done an amazing job, and we are really lucky to have the passion and commitment of the team running the service. It's incredible. Just to be really clear, as a health board, we are really committed to providing the service. We do have an existing plan that's about consolidating all of our mental health services that would bring mother and baby unit together. It's some way off, and actually we're revisiting it. I think I've mentioned we've got a special board advisor on mental health, and we are re-looking at that. Anita is aware of that, so it's very much part of our thinking around what is our permanent long-term solution, medium-term solution in terms of consolidating our mental health services. So it is part of our thinking and part of our specification about what we would expect to provide going forward. And the access point, Tonna is a lovely place, and lovely trees around it, very beautiful, but it is not easy to get to. Public transport off the motorway up to Tonna is a difficult journey. And if we're providing this across the whole of the M4 corridor and right down to West Wales, we need to think about where services are located. And that is definitely part of the conversation around how we co-locate services together. And we're also very mindful this is on a site that doesn't have adult mental health services, and it doesn't have paediatrics or obstetric services. So in an ideal world, and that's what we'll be looking at, how you co-locate those things together. And Nita's aware of the conversation we've been having. And just to say, there's an offer, Ian, and I think we're going to follow up on this for board members from the JCC to visit. We probably need to do it in small groups because it is really tiny, and we don't have the space that we'd like for families. So we'd love more space for families to be able to cook together and prepare meals together. The team do a brilliant job in terms of particularly it's significant events during the calendar year where families would come together, either perhaps religious points in the year where eating together is really important. So we try and make sure we can accommodate that. But we're happy to facilitate. We can do several visits if people want to keep the numbers down, but we'll make sure those of you who want to go first can come and visit in the next couple of months.
Thanks, Abby. Anita, and then finally Adrian.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back in around the point of around carers needs assessment. So just to be clear, carers needs assessment is offered as standard on admission for all families. What we recognise is that partners tending to be male partners will often decline that at that point in time. That isn't something they feel able to do. So the carers needs assessment is offered as standard routinely as part of the admission process. What we've now added in is that we ask again at another point and continue to ask. Partners and significant others are routinely invited to every ward round and MDT. They can attend remotely, they can attend in person. We actively really encourage that. We try and plan times. We always try and keep it to the same time so they can plan ahead. Lots of people are still working. So just wanted to be clear about that, so that there wasn't any confusion about that. And also just in this case, I think it probably is really important to recognise our community specialist team colleagues in Hywel Dda as well. Between the unit and the specialist perinatal community team, a huge amount of work went into trying to support this family. So I don't know if Jess said it in the video, but in this clip, but she did it when she presented previously, that her partner also has significant mobility needs. The challenge we would have been able to do much more with supporting the transport. But unfortunately, Jess required such large pieces of equipment for her mobility that we weren't able to actually physically get Jess her equipment, the car seat, the partner, the other child in our car. Otherwise, we would have probably been able to do much more. But between ourselves and the community perinatal team, we did support quite a lot of those journeys. But this was a very brilliantly involved family who wanted to visit very often, and I think that was really helpful for recovery. But there were limitations on what we could do around physically supporting that transport.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Anita. I'm just going to bring Nicola in then and hand her over to Aidan to sum up.
Yeah, there's only a quick point, and I suppose it's that with somebody's husband or some is not seeing them as they hear. So if you said you're doing like a partner's needs assessment, or it maybe it's the language that's used and adapting it, because I think people think about it in a different way. And the only other second point, thank you for the story, is very powerful, is whether we use peer support in the unit as well. I know in I11 we've got somebody who's been through that service as a peer mentor, and it has a huge impact on the kind of mothers who are going through that and scary time. So I just wondered if they use peer mentors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So after I heard what was in QSO and saw the video and spoke to Jess, I went to the unit because I've been a mental health nurse for 35 years, but I've never been to a mother and baby unit. So I went down to the Tony unit, and it was absolutely fantastic. The staff, they were brilliant. I spoke to some of the mothers there. It was it was an eye opener. There are issues, as Abby said, but it is a repurposed unit. So from that, and Harold's mentioned the video, I've commissioned the same company to do the video that are doing the North Wales unit, the Chester unit. So it'll be a similar video which can go on the websites of JCC and all the health boards. With travel, before Shane left, he'd met with the Minister of Mental Health and Wellbeing, and she's said to him that she had a small pot of money that she wanted to make available to the mother and baby unit for whatever they need, basically travel-wise, etc. So I've asked Anita to speak to people who are in there now, people who've been there before, to see what we can use that money for. So hopefully there'll be some help available for that. And I've also invited the Chester service, when it's open, the clinicians from there, to come down to the unit just to speak to Anita and see what learning they can take back before the unit's open. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. And Anita, could you please pass on our thanks to Jess for her willingness to share her experience with us, and just to give her the feedback that actually that we've heard very clearly what she said, and there's clearly some action being taken to try and respond to that. And thank you for your work and for what you do as well, Anita.
Thanks very much, Al. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, everybody. It's, again, really important we hear those powerful patient stories. If we go back to the agenda, we're running slightly behind, but I'm sure we'll catch up. Moving on to my report, hopefully it's self-explanatory. You'll see that I've had my accounts with the Cabinet Secretary, my objectives set for the year. There's standard objectives now for all of the chairs of all roles that are appointed by the Cabinet Secretary. I think they're much clearer in terms of what his governance responsibilities linked to operational experiences, but there will be some interface between the chair and the chief commissioner's objectives. And just one other addition, in addition to the meetings that have taken place for the last period, Paul and I did a very interesting visit to Welsh Ambulance Service. We spent a morning at Crumbrang and listening to some really interesting calls and understand a bit more about processes within Welsh Ambulance. So that was also really positive. But happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Chair, just one issue. Firstly, just to say, yeah, the visit to the ambulance service was really excellent. Wanted to express my appreciation also for the time and the staff time, really good. Second issue is the Ministerial Advisory Group on Productivity report was launched. And I guess that's something that we're going to need as a committee to take into account.
It's something that we'll need to bring back into how we deliver the foundation plan. There are a number of different links to the action around the Ministerial Advisory Committee, particularly around ambulance service. That's something that we will need to make sure that we are feeding in. I think it's really important we make this as business as usual almost, and make sure it becomes a part of what we need to deliver. But Stacey, if you want to.
Yeah, no, I think what's really important, there's broader principles, isn't it, that's come out of there around performance, prioritisation and pace. And I just think we've got to make sure that our internal priorities are aligned to the outcomes of that report as well. And I know there's been conversations with chief executives more broadly. So yeah, when Hugh comes back, I'll be interested to have another conversation just to make sure that that's a live subject as we go throughout this year.
Thank you. Any other questions? You note the report. Moving on to the Chief Commissioner's report. Stacey, anything you wish to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the report as read. It's Hugh's report this month, just to acknowledge, the report acknowledges where we've been in transition this year. There's a typo at the bottom of page 2 around the date of the risk appetite. It was December 2024. I'll spot it, Mandy. But just to update where we are with transition, work continues and is going well. In terms of the CCLG agenda, we had a good discussion covering a number of topics, including SWAN. It was after the ministerial meeting earlier on last month. It was earlier on this month. It's running into one. But an internal advisory report that was quite positive in relation to the setup of the governance, and we are taking some recommendations from that in terms of our internal leadership groups. The accountability status and our statutory requirements are listed in section 5, and some changes to our senior leadership team, just to make you aware. So as you know, Shane has departed and Adrian has come into the fold for the Director of Commissioner for Mental Health, Learning Difficulties and Vulnerable Groups. And we've also asked George to come in as the Director of, I'm going to get this wrong, Director of Planning and Corporate Strategy. Corporate Planning and Strategy. Oh, I knew it. I didn't get it. It's probably just George. Oh, golly. And then finally to congratulate Jackie for her appointment to the new Assistant Director of Governance and Secretary to the Council of Nursing and Midwifery. So congratulations, Jack. I think your final date is 4th of July, Independence Day, I should know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations, Jackie, and that we will keep you for a little bit yet. So, any questions for Stacey on your report?
Sorry, me again, Chair. Really helpful. I notice we've got a 29% vacancy rate, and we've talked before about the level of work that's going through and the capacity to absorb that. And I'm just wondering, what's our plan to deal with that?
So shall I hand over to George, because we've got a prioritised recruitment plan George can talk to you about. Yeah, we can. So we looked at all the vacancies. I have to say that there's a lot at quite a senior level in the organisation in terms of the capacity gap for us to fill. So we've got a prioritised recruitment plan, because clearly we need to make sure that we don't do them all at once. But in the same breath, what we are doing is, for example, the assistant directors of commissioning for each of the commissioning directorates, we've run one process for that. So talked to Ross earlier about it. We've had a really good cohort of applicants, so really positive. So we're streamlining the recruitment where we can to make sure we maximise on that. And obviously we are working through an engineered way, so where we can fill those higher tier posts to then help us fill the subsequent posts as well. But there are some exceptions to that where we have got significant risks that we're trying to manage. We will look to fill other roles slightly lower down in the organisation, because they are critical to the business continuity. So yeah, we've looked at the whole recruitment plan and planned it out and prioritised it accordingly. But all things considered, we should have done all of the interviews by probably end of July with a bit of luck. And then obviously it depends on time scales that people need to give to come into role. So yeah.
Thank you. Hayley, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I note there's reference to the collaborative commissioning leadership group and a request for us to ensure that executive directors do attend to support the important work of that group. I just had a query. in terms of, it talks about choracy. So are we not accepting, because there will be occasions perhaps where executive directors may not be able to attend. Can I just check if choracy allows for them to, on the occasions they're unable to attend themselves, the named individuals, for that health board representative to be considered as part of the choracy, if that's okay?
Currently, the terms of reference are explicit in that it needs to be an executive director. However, to date, we recognise the challenges in being able to send that designation. So we have been running the meetings with colleagues from health boards who are not designated executive directors, under the assumption that there are no decisions to be made at those meetings. It's just discussion and information. But the terms of reference are explicit. It should be an executive director.
I think the only thing I would add, Hayley, is the whole purpose of the CCLG is to be a really key engagement mechanism to support you as chief executives when you come around this table. So as long as you're comfortable that that close connection with you is feeding in and briefing you, then we can have a look at the terms of reference. But fundamentally, it's there to be that conduit between sort of advising you as chief executives and developing the work of the JCC in collaboration. So we can have a look at it, but that's the fundamental principle.
Yeah, and I do agree, Chair. I do agree with it that we should ensure executive directors attend, but on the occasions, I just wanted to make sure that the choracy wasn't sort of a problem. Thank you for that clarification.
Andy.
Yeah, could I just ask a question? In terms of the risk appetite that's referenced on page 2 of the report, it talks about being a strategy session in Q3. And I'm just wondering whether, because it later on in the risk register, it talks about June. So I wasn't quite sure in terms of the timing to help us prioritise going forward and hopefully what will be a 3-year IMTP.
Yeah, and apologies, Mandy, because you did ask me that yesterday, and I haven't got the same. But I'll need to pick it up with Hugh when he comes back in from annual leave. So the original plan was that we bring something back to June. The June has such a large agenda attached to it, and with Jackie leaving, that we wanted to align any risk work going forward with the new appointment of that role. So we'll have to carefully think about how we utilise the time in June, and if we focus any time on the risk appetite itself. It's quite a big piece of work, and we've done a lot so far, but it's making sure that we have the right conversation at the right time, really.
Should we take that away, I think, but thanks for flagging it, and let's see what Hugh's thinking is. Great, thank you very much. Can we move on then to the away from the Chief Commissioner's report onto the director reports? And again, colleagues, assuming you've read the reports, just pull out any key highlights. But again, there's about 10 minutes from each report. So Ross, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So just a couple of key important items, I guess. So the first item just picks up the Cabinet Secretary's announcement for the revised performance standards for ambulance services. So the intention is for that to go live on the 1st of July. WAST and with support from us from JCT have done a huge amount of work in terms of developing the data definitions for the delivery of the new performance framework. And we have a checkpoint meeting with Welsh Government later this afternoon in anticipation of us writing to them with those revised definitions by the end of this month. The WAF board has held an extraordinary board to assure itself of the organisation preparedness to deliver the new standards, and the board are assured of that. So we are on track at the moment for that new revised framework to go live on the 1st of July. I've also attached the letter that I received from Darren Griffiths explaining the changes to the framework, which also highlighted the Cabinet Secretary's announcement of the transfer of the Save Life Cymru programme into the Welsh Ambulance Service, and therefore commissioned by the JCC. So George and myself will be meeting with NHS Executive and Welsh Government colleagues to assure ourselves on the commissioning implications of that. It is a fully funded programme, so we're not anticipating any financial consequences for the JCC. It's a relatively small programme, but I think very, very much aligned with the announcement that CABSEC has made around the changes to performance standards and the ambition for Wales to become a nation of lifesavers. So I think a really great opportunity in sort of consolidating the work of that programme within WAST and the opportunity for the JCC to influence that through its commissioning role. We've talked previously around the clinical-led National Ambulance Improvement Delivery Group, and as we touched on earlier, there's a recommendation within the Ministerial Advisory Group around the delivery of 45-minute handover. So that group will be really key in driving forward that improvement. And as we know, the delivery of that will be really, really key for reducing the ambulance-associated risk that the JCC is currently holding. Manchester Arena, just to update members, so we have now completed 4 workshops with Health Board nominated representatives. That was an opportunity for them to meet with WAST and to discuss the assessment that has been provided. We are in conversation with directors of planning now for Health Board nominations for the next phase of that piece of work, which will be the scrutiny of the case. We're planning to take that in June, and alongside that we have sought independent legal advice. And following our strategy development session last month, we are seeking an appropriate independent individual to consider the case, also to provide an additional layer of advice to you as a committee when we do bring a decision paper to you. I just wanted to touch on non-emergency patient transport services, and I know Mandy picked up some transport elements. We are in somewhat a bit of a perfect storm of challenges with NEPs. So the complexity of patients' mobility is increasing, therefore the amount of patients that can be transported up per vehicle is reducing. External providers who we don't have a huge amount in Wales, but they do provide a flexible additional capacity. We've seen quite the growth in the cost of external providers, and health board service changes have also led to some longer journeys, as well as an increasing demand for both transfers and discharge work. So I just wanted to flag really as something we will need to consider going forward in terms of the capacity of the NEP service and what we want it to do. We've got the vision document that the committee approved in April, and we're working with WAST as an organisation now on what does a delivery plan for that look like. But members will also note one of the first recommendations in the MAG report talks around modernisation and the change of outpatients. So there's opportunities to link these things together to free up NEP's capacity to support broader system changes. Just want to flag that. I've asked WAST to undertake a deep dive into 111 service performance. We'll be considering that next week. And I think there's just on 111 more broadly, I think we should likely bring a conversation more broadly as the JCC, so I think we can have a better understanding of the committee's view and ambition for 111 moving forward as part of the Health Board's urgent care service offer. And then finally, just to pick up the emergency medical treatment transfer judicial review, we received correspondence from the judge earlier this month indicating he'd been unwell and therefore apologising for the delay, and we expect a further update in terms of the outcome later this month.
Thanks very much, Ross. And on the next issue, in terms of, it'd be good to get again, perhaps not now, but what are the building blocks that need to be put in place to undertake what sounds like it's going to need to be a quite fundamental review in terms of both sustainability but also operationalisation of the current strategies.
Yeah, so I think there's a whole combination of things in terms of, we are seeing a shift in the pattern and size of demand, but equally there's a significant level of inefficiency in the system. So there are large numbers of both patient and health board on the day cancellations that makes it limited in terms of the capacity that then can be reused. There's issues around the eligibility criteria and how that's applied. And I guess, more broadly, what the ambition and the prioritisation of the committee is in terms of the service and how it works. So we've got the vision document, and I think underneath that we can hang the delivery and the review of what the future looks like in terms of
the timescales.
So the work is ongoing now. Happy to bring an update to the next committee meeting in terms of where we're at next.
Just to support the 111 comment that Ross made, I think so. It's something that's been transferred into us, isn't it, in the last 12 months, and just lifting some of the lid on some of the 111. There's huge opportunity in it for us, and I think as a committee we can really have a good think about how we want how we would like to commission our service going forward. So I do think that that would be a really good session for us to bring back at some point, and to be really clear on how that can actually help us with some of the broader productivity challenges that we all got in the system. And we know that some of the connectivity of that 111 service isn't quite where it needs to be. It can really offer some really good opportunities. So I'd really encourage us to probably just bring a bit of focus around a conversation on that through whatever mechanism, whether you want us to do it somewhere else before here, but definitely bringing the committee more sighted on that activity.
I think we witnessed some of that, didn't we, Paul, when we did a visit around the connectivity between 111 and 999, and the opportunity that exists there in terms of sort of the patient journey being much more seamless, and which will drive greater efficiency.
I think what I would say is there are a myriad of very strong views about what 111 should and could be. I think the missing bit is actually a collective view here at the committee level about what it is you would like to commission from us.
Yeah, thank you. That's really welcomed. And I think I've mentioned it in a previous forum, but I can't remember which one, that Swansea Bay hosts the clinical hubs.
Yeah.
And we need to look at the governance of that. And so that's kind of on behalf of the Six Goals project, program, but it absolutely is fundamental in terms of where it interfaces. And for me, this is all part of a phone first model. And knowing that we still have too many people who end up in our ED department whose care needs could more appropriately have been dealt with somewhere else. So we would very much welcome, as we review the clinical hub hosting, not even the clinical model bit, the hosting bit, being part of that conversation and making sure that you're tied into that conversation with us.
Yeah, and I think, the clinical support hubs is very important bit, so that doesn't currently sit under the remit of the JCC, but we need to have that strategic conversation about what our ambition is for national coordination of care versus the local determination.
It's not properly commissioned, the hubs yet, and it needs to be.
Thank you. Rachel, then Phil, then we'll pull this report together.
Thank you. I was just going to say, Chair, that I really support the idea that the committee looks at more in more detail, but really to flag as well that there are quite a lot of conversations going on outside the committee through the Six Goals programme. Welsh Government are currently developing an urgent care strategy. Numbers of us are working on learning from the Denmark model, which picks up some of this, as well as you've mentioned, a contact or phone first approach. So it would be good, really, if we can find a way collectively to bring it all into one discussion, as opposed to different groups having similar conversations. So I think that would be helpful to reflect on how we do that.
I think that'll be very helpful, Rachel, and not to try and reinvent the wheel and to do things 2 or 3 times, as is often the case. Thank you. We'll pick that up on that. Phil, then we'll bring this item to a close.
Well, I was just thinking that the sort of deep dive that Ross was suggesting and bringing together the work that Rachel was discussing there is probably more than a 10-minute item. And I suppose it might be I don't know whether we can have the discussion at a development session or some other forum, but it may need more the time than we can give it in one of these committee sessions.
I think that's right. I don't think we can do justice in a challenged agenda, but let's try and see if we can create space to do this well, but also take that Rachel point in terms of making sure we got the right players in once rather than on 3 or 4 separate occasions. I think we'll take that away, Ross, and take that as an action to look at how we do that. But thank you very much for your report. And obviously, it's really important that we get the outcome of the judicial review as soon as possible, but it's not in our hands. Great, thank you very much. And moving on to mental health, Director of Specialist Services.
I pick up Mel's report, Mel's annually today. So take it as a read report. I'll just pick out a few points, Swan being one of them, given that the paper requests for the recurrent funding for the Swan service today. Just to assure members that Joint Committee had asked our CCRG group to provide assurance to the committee that the previously prioritised scheme had been properly assessed through the CR process, and the adoption of the benefits that service has allowed It was agreed at the CCLG meeting that the service should not be decommissioned at this stage, and recommended that it should continue until the end of the financial year and considered for a long-term investment as part of the prioritisation for 26-29. However, since we've had some correspondence with the service, and we've also considered that in the broader context of commissioning the service actively going forward. So the paper actually asks for a current approval of funding today. There was only one dissenting health board at the CCLG meeting, and broadly everybody else was broadly supportive of releasing the funding currently into the plan this year, given that it is part of the plan position and funding already provided for. But this will allow the service to agree with a continued heightened degree of certainty, but will also allow us to commission more actively with the service and get and make sure that the service is actually delivering value for money for the things that it's actually being asked to deliver for us. Don't know if Suzanne wants to say anything.
No, there was just to add really, colleagues. So I don't know, it's just more information really, so for the committee to make a decision. But the Swan Clinic has also secured VPAG funding, which many of you may or may not be aware of, which is the ABPI funding from Big Pharma. It's a UK allocation of £22 million to Wales for the enablement of clinical research across Wales, and particularly commercial trials. And 1.2 million has been offered as a grant, or the team bid for it as a grant to the Swan Clinic. So that 1.2 million will probably run over 4 years. I haven't drawn that money down for obvious reasons, really. We haven't got certainty on the long-term surety of the service provision, but it would create additional capacity for probably some of the work that you're describing, Stacey, there around evaluation and understanding impact. So that was just a bit of additional information. Clearly, if we don't draw that money down, that'll go back to the pot and it'll be reallocated. And many of you will know where or not you've been successful in bids to that.
Thanks, Suzanne. Any other comments or questions on that report or on Swan in particular?
It's just to state the obvious, really, I suppose, in terms of Swan. I know Suzanne's raised it a couple of times about the sustainability of the service, and having some surety does help both individual clinicians and patients as well. So I welcome the fact that there's been a successful bid that will give us the evaluation of that, because from a patient perspective, they want to know how to deal with their condition, even though it is an expensive service potentially to run and commission. So I think that's a really positive point Suzanne's raised.
Suzanne, then Hayley.
I'm trying to put my hand down, but I'm not sure it's coming down. So okay.
Hayley.
Yeah, could I just ask, in terms of the service issues that are in the report around the cochlear implant, etc., just I'm wondering about when we will be receiving further information on the work that's being undertaken there, just recognising we've been working on this for some time. Thanks.
Yeah, Hayley, can I go back to you with some timescales? We'll get a note out to you. I think Mel's back in tomorrow, so we'll get a note out to you tomorrow on the detail. Thanks, Hayley.
Brilliant, thanks.
Just some feedback in terms of the report. I mean, I think quite helpful just to really try to tease out what are sort of the 3 or 4 really key issues that as a committee we should be seeking further assurance on. Lots of information there, but I don't think it's drawing out for me, key risk and also prioritisation, because we've been talking quite a bit, haven't we, not just at the JCC meeting, but also broader development sessions around cardiac thoracic pathways, neonatal, mental health, which are covered elsewhere, but those in terms of being key priorities, which we need to focus our time and attention on. So I think it'd be really helpful from my perspective that we try and make sure we're teasing out those issues as we go through the report. Thank you very much. So let's go to the recommendations. There's no further issues. So we're being asked to note the report note the risks that are there, and also the interface between the quality and outcomes committee. But specifically, we're being asked to approve the recurrent funding for the Swan service. Happy to agree those recommendations. Great, thank you very much. Moving on then to Adrian, Adrian, your report.
I can remember.
Again, just tease out any issue.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I took the papers as read. I did want to just go through the perinatal section, just to say that we'd the report, demand and capacity report on the utilisation of beds and the future modelling has been completed and is now on the JCC website. The summary of that basically is we've probably commissioned the right amount of beds now in Wales. The last few years, we've had 164 patients admitted. 81% of those are in Wales or have been in Wales. I think people going out to area or into England are mainly from the north, Betsy Cadwallader, because there's no unit up there. There have been a couple from South Wales as well, but that's due to capacity issues, etc. The report looked at distance travel, which was obviously important. We've heard from the patient experience this morning. So there's an average of 63 miles travel, which is, it's a fair distance, usually within an hour of a unit, but outliers again, Betsy, because there's no unit there. Patients are travelling to English services. That will get better with the opening of the unit in Chester towards the end of the year in October. So hopefully that travel time will come down. And the report looks at future provision as well. So, what would good look like? Do we need 8 beds? Do we need more? Do we need less? It does give examples of if we had 9 beds or 10 beds or 8 beds, what the wait for those patients in particular areas would look like. And there's also the consideration to, look at investment into community services so that we don't need so many beds. So there's those options as well. And then location of a unit is going to be important. It's the South Wales unit, even though it's in Con at the moment, we heard earlier, patient travelling from Pembroke, it still takes them 2.5 hours to get there. So there's all those considerations from that report, really. And then there's other innovations that we've looked at. There's a model in Leeds where there's a enhanced weekend provision from perinatal services. And there's some units in England that offer the travel fund that we're talking about. So that's the perinatal mental health. Is there any questions or do you want to
to anything else you want to tease out, Adrian, in terms of what we'll take the questions separately? Is there nothing else? Paul?
Just that's helpful. 2 quick questions on what's the sort of current average length of stay and what's the sort of current waiting time for admission as well?
Average length of stay is it's in 41 days.
It is still 41.
Yeah, so that's the average length of stay. Waiting times varies at the moment. I think there's one patient in the unit in South Wales, but then a few weeks ago there was, it was full, and there's a couple of weeks wait. We do look at using alternative provision though, so it's usually a day or 2 because mothers can't wait to be admitted if they're that unwell. So if the unit is full, we'll utilise NHS England beds with the understanding that they should be brought back to the unit in South Wales once there's a bed available.
Just a general question for me. We had obviously a very helpful presentation at the development session last month. And out of that came some actions or some proposed way forward in terms of some of the transformation. Just get some assurance that that's all been built into your current work plans and some of those drivers of productivity and transformational change.
Yeah, there is, and I think even with the South Wales unit, I think there's some different views on staffing with the health board and what we commission, and also do the staff review on the unit in South Wales to make sure that we've got the proper level of staff and they've got the proper funding to provide the service to them. So that's in the plan for this year.
So it's the breadth in terms of the whole broader mental health piece, not just in terms of.
Yeah. So obviously we've got the North Wales bit, we've got and what happens, people in the middle. So we're looking at that.
And so in terms of being cited on that, that will come through either specific reports here or in the commission report that will come to each JCC meeting, just think about the governance.
Yeah, so we'll bring any updates to this meeting. And there was, a strategy meeting that we had there, we can update those.
Yeah. So I just think there's something about, and this is a key theme that came out of my meeting with the Cabinet Secretary about pace, about making sure that we're moving forward with some rigour in some of those issues which we've identified as being sort of the key priorities. So mental health, ambulance, cardiac, and neonatal services, making sure that's been built in to the committee being cited on that. Not to say that we've got the plan and we deliver against the plan, and we come on to talk about the delivery of the plan shortly. But I think it would just be good to make sure that we, as a committee, are constantly being reminded of the key priorities, and that we're providing governance and assurance around that in terms of that rigour. So, Nia and then Hayley.
Yes, I was just wondering, you describe, I mean, I am from North Wales, I'm going to ask this, right? And I was thinking about the distance that has to be travelled to access a mother and baby unit. Has there been any work on with the clinical, effect of that on how well does that have an effect? Can you measure whether distance, do you know what I mean? Is it worse do people get better slower because they're further away from home, I suppose is what I'm asking. I just want to know.
There's no data on that, whether it makes people more unwell or the actual travel time. Obviously, ideally, we'd have a unit in the middle of North Wales, but beds numbers, we've got.
I'm not. I understand, but I understand the geography. I'm just saying, if there was a clinical factor as well, it might help us. It might help a decision one way or the other as to whether that needs to happen. If it doesn't make any difference to people, whether people get better or not, then why should there be one in the middle of North Wales? Okay.
I think there is obviously the new unit is still going to be in England, but we have commissioned an in-reach worker from the North Wales perinatal team as well to make sure that transition back home is as smooth as it can be. So they're linked into their perinatal team even though they're in England.
Hayley?
Yeah, thank you, Adrian, for your report. And I can see that you have identified the fire in Glamreid Hospital and the impact of that in your report. And clearly, we've had to be pragmatic around the decant arrangements. But I'm just interested in the high-level statement in the report around the impact on the availability of medium secure beds, but also the potential solution being an 8-month issue. So I'm interested in understanding how we can have further detail and assurance on the impact on both low and medium secure access, and what's happening in relation to is it planned to continue with the decant during that period, or whether there's a different option that we might need to be considering due to the availability of capacity both for low and medium secure placements and the appropriateness of that.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. Hugh George and myself are meeting with Dermot Nolan in Swansea Bay week after next to discuss a way forward. So at the moment, the patients are still decanted. We are keeping a record or a list of how many patients that's affected, because there's two issues in Caswell. There's the fire issue, but even before the fire, there was issues around the environment and seclusion, etc. So we've got two different issues around why, because I think there's actually 2 beds in Caswell. There's still patients that can't come back there because of the physical environment and because of the seclusion. So I know that Swansea Bay have got there is funding to look at 2 extra seclusion rooms as well. But from the fire perspective, we'll be meeting with the health board next month to discuss.
Billy?
Yeah, thank you. Really helpful, Adrian. And I think it's, it's a really difficult situation. And I'm glad we've been able to put a arrangement in place up until now. I think my question is the appropriateness of that, depending on the length of time the solution takes, and whether we could perhaps just understand that a little bit more, either through one of the committees or further discussions. So it's really assuring to hear those conversations are taking place, and I know people are working hard, but I am concerned about a potential decant arrangement done in a crisis situation, being checking that that's the most appropriate approach for potentially up to a 2-year period.
Yeah, and that's something we will discuss. There are the health boards with empty low secure wards, which, there's options like that. But originally we did think it was going to be probably 6 months, but I think there's more damage than we thought. So it's going to be 18 months now.
Okay, so I think it sounds like there's a specific action we need to take to make sure the committee has cited on this, which is that going from a crisis situation into now a longer term situation. What options are being considered, and are there any decisions that the JCC need to take? And probably and it's good that there's conversations taking place. I think that should be brought back to the next JCC meeting.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I think that it's so the action around being clear around the plan and it's expedited an 8-month time scale, I think, is the request from the committee. So we'll work with the provider to ensure that we have got a plan to pull back and make sure that committee members are cited on.
Okay, at our next meeting. Great, thank you very much. Anything else on Adrian's report? Don't we note that report?
Yeah, just a good question. The repatriation of the care managers, quite interesting. It ties into sort of later discussion as well. I guess there's going to be sort of implications, pros and cons. Just wondering if you've got any thoughts about what are the barriers to achievability of that?
So we've got 4 case managers in Caswell, one in Tito and Betsy, funded by us. The plan, it's in the foundation plan this year, is to bring them back or bring them into the JCC. We've only just had initial conversations with the case managers themselves and the 2 directorates around how we do that. Are they happy to do, what's their thoughts on it? And there's 2P arrangements, etc., which take quite a long time. So that's where we are at the moment, just looking at possibility. It may not happen, but the plan is to bring them back. But we'll have to see.
Let's take that out. I think it's a more operational issue, but let's. Okay.
Thanks for that. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Let's note the report. Let's take a break until 20 past. And then we'll need to be quite strict in terms of our timescales because we're running about half an hour behind today. So thank you very much. 20 past, a short break. Welcome back, everybody. Just looking at the agenda, we do want to make sure we're finished by 1 o'clock. And so there are a number of items where we do need to there's some approvals required. A number which is about updating and noting. And so again, that if I can encourage colleagues, if they're presenting a report, and assume that we read it, just pull out the key issues and particularly focus if there's any decisions that we need to take, would be really helpful today. So we're moving on now to the development of the Joint Commission Committee strategy, George.
Thank you, Chair. There are a handful of slides that I think Helen's going to share. So I just wanted to update everybody on the development of our strategy. That I know a few, just to confirm a few fixed points in the development of that strategy and make sure that you're all comfortable with the approach. So onto the first slide, please. So our vision is to be the centre of excellence for collaborative commissioning. I assume we're all happy to stick with that. Moving on very quickly then to confirm our strategic objectives. We said at the time that they were approved subject to a review at an appropriate time, but I think for the sake of development of a strategy, we're using those as a fixed point to move on from. The next slide then, again, is our values and behaviours that we've agreed back in September. So again, another fixed point. So on to the next slide then. This is the components of a strategy and how we're going to construct it. So taking the top section first, clinical evidence is really the cornerstone of effectiveness, and we will use NICE and other sources to inform our decision making. Bottom right, legislative framework and policy. So we're going to look at what's within the gift of the JCC as the only forum with collaborative decision-making powers for the population of Wales. Do we need to do anything that we're not doing? Do we need to stop doing things that focus on what is needed? We'll look at national and international best practice frameworks, and we'll build on the work that the Directors of Planning did back in 2023 on commissioning framework. We'll revisit that and refine and develop that further. And then bottom left-hand side, population need. We've talked about in securing public health in that population needs assessment, doing the horizon scanning, shifting prevention to prevention whilst tackling high-level service risk areas. What are the health board requirements in relation to the commissioning and provider lens? And we want staff within the JCC to be seen as subject matter experts, so that becomes the centre of excellence issue in commissioning. We want to be the employer of choice for a range of professions as well, to boost our organisational capability and capacity. So, and then the middle bit really is to bring it all together to make sure that we do have a decision-making framework to help support prioritisation in the JCC, manage the risk and focus our investment to meet population need. So that's the construct of the strategy. I will ask if anybody has any thoughts or comments on that, or you can obviously feedback to me separately. There'll be plenty of opportunity for engagement. I'll quickly move on to timelines and then we can stop for a brief reflection if that's okay, Chair. So timelines you'll see from this very broad that we've obviously started in April. Now in May, June, we're at the Joint Committee. We're doing a best practice benchmarking exercise. We're organising an internal workshop within the JCC in the first instance to find out what colleagues within the JCC feel. We've already started working with the CCLG. We had a session at the last meeting for about an hour and a half to talk about the development strategy and got some initial thoughts from then. We'll also have a strategy session with the Joint Committee as well to focus on developing this. We'll go out for formal engagement. We will obviously involve CLICE and other health board colleagues as necessary. And then ultimately have something to draft as to socialise with you in draft form by December. So all of that will tie into the development of our IMTP. So one will inform the other. And so hopefully by December you'll have a much clearer view of the sort of IMTP and the strategy direction of travel. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through it, but hopefully, as I say, you'll get an idea of the construct of a strategy, how we're going to go about doing it, and those are the main questions that I just posed that we'll use as sources of engagement as we go through the process. So happy to take any thoughts on the approach or the components of the strategy.
Can we perhaps go back 2 slides?
2 slides, yeah.
just again, just sense check whether people feel comfortable that in terms of sort of the key elements that you expect to see within the strategy, that they are the areas that from the JCC's perspective would be the areas of priority. Because I think that's the most important element that I would suggest that we just need to give some thought or reflection to today. So I've got Phil, Susan, and then Paul.
Thanks very much. Good to see this as it's developing. I was looking at the exactly this slide. I was just thinking about the 3 areas on the triangle, and I wondered about sort of the public value or use of resources. I was sort of thinking better health, better care, best use of resources. And I know I can see in there you've got risk and value based prioritization, but there's always going to be a intersect between the best evidence and what where we best there'll always be some sort of resource constraint. I just wonder where you saw that fitting into that thinking.
Thanks, Paul. Come back to George a minute. Susan.
Just one comment, if I may, Chair. You mentioned the word specifically prevention, but it's not on that initial slide. And really, I was wondering in terms of your thinking, what primacy is going to be given to prevention.
So has then that the implication as well in terms of where's the public health lens come through to it as well? Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of things from me. First of all, I guess it's just about being clear over what time frame are we talking about this strategy being sort of valid, would be the first thing. And secondly, we've talked a lot, haven't we, previously in these meetings about needing to have some clarity about what do we strategically want specialist services to do in Wales, and that tension between at what point does the need for a service in Wales because of the population need or the geographical challenges get balanced out by the ability to actually deliver clinical services of this specialist nature because of workforce challenges or estate or capital challenges. So is that something we're going to be able to start to articulate in this, in terms of what's the critical mass we need to deliver some of these services in Wales versus where might we be better placed to be going into a much more collaborative conversation with neighbours about how we might want to commission some of these services outside of Wales. And I think that's one of the tensions we've always wrestled with a bit in some of the specialist conversations, and I'm just wanting to make sure that we're going to pick that up as one of the sort of dimensions to consider as part of this strategy.
Thanks, Paul. And there's a point that I was thinking in terms of that we talk about fragile services that we're commissioning. How will the development of our strategy help us to address those? And you broadened that out somewhat, which I think is very sensible. Let's take some other comments to Hayley, and then I'll see if there's anything else. Then ask George if she can pull that together a bit in terms of the feedback she's heard.
Yeah, thank you. Paul's picked up the critical mass sort of issue that I was keen to get reflected. I think in terms of scope as well, George, just is this for all business or is this around specialised services is a question, because it's I wanted to cover off. And I think the other issue is that in terms of the components of this strategy, there's an issue for me around particularly thinking about the ministerial advisory group. But we're quite binary sometimes between national and perhaps local or provider models around some of this. So I think there's a little bit of working through the relationship between this work, which is national or Wales, and the sort of perhaps regional, local in relation to making sure that we're looking at to what extent we can integrate whole care pathways as part of our assessment of the strategy. Thanks.
Thanks, Hayley. Victoria. Victoria, just say Victoria's now representing Suzanne, who's had to go off another call.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of points, I think, from Cardiff and Vale. I think Phil's mentioned already that clarity over the planning assumptions. I think they're really critical that this group approves those developing planning assumptions over a period of time is critical in driving the strategy over the next few years. Hayley also mentioned the scope, but I think that's really critical that this group, again, sort of really defines that and approves that. I also identifying the alignment with our own strategies and a review of these, given that a number of us as commissioning health boards have set out our strategies or refreshed them within the last sort of 12-month period. I think it would be really nice to see that as a part of the ongoing process. I'm aware also the NHS exec are doing the work on the fragile services, so the kind of dovetail into that, I think, and how this strategy will support and respond to that may be helpful. Alongside that desire to make sure we're including in that then the whole care pathways and the alignment with those services and the planning for the services that won't quite reach the scope of the strategy. So there's a lot in there that other people have covered, but I think those would be our key points just to note for the planning, and really happy to catch up with the team offline.
Thanks, Victoria. Shamim, then I'll come back to George.
I don't know if this belongs in this comment, but I wondered if equality, equity should also be.
Yeah. So that again, just a reflection. Health inequality is where do they fit, and just broader equalities issues and making sure that's covered. I think that's absolutely should be here. George.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think all this has been really, really helpful, and I think a very high-level slide isn't going to capture all of the buzzwords, unfortunately. But certainly, that Susan, you mentioned about prevention, the population needs assessment is critical to that. So obviously, we're working on getting public health involvement in that and making sure that there is a focus on that whilst dealing with those high-risk areas that are facing us right here and now. Interesting enough, one of the things I posed to the CCLG was, where are we an organisation that shifts our focus to prevention? And some views were, no, that's not where you're best focused. So I think there will be a debate to be had about what it is that we continue to do, where we need to focus. And at the end of the day, it is for the health board to guide us in where they want us to focus that. Paul, your point about time frame, another good question I have flagged, whether it's a 5 or 10 year strategy, that's to be determined. So views on that would be really helpful. Obviously, if we have a 3-year IMTP, then is 5 years sufficiently long enough for us to look at? Do we want to look at longer than that? But it is a timescale to be determined at this stage. The sustainability critical mass thing, absolutely critical to that prioritisation decision-making bubble in the middle. So again, it will be picked up. It's probably not drawn out in this slide, but it is critical to all of that. And Hayley, is it all services or specialised services? It's intended to include all services that are currently within the scope of the standing orders of the JCC. But clearly, again, the point is made about linking it to the work of the regional areas needs to be dovetailed in, and the care pathway integration is a really critical point. So I don't want to go on to my next agenda item, but there are a number of areas for our strategic priorities that look beyond the scope of the JCC and look at system-wide issues. So I think there is work we can do to facilitate that as part of the strategy anyway. And I'm just looking through my notes that I made. And the NHS exec, yeah, we've already started building really close relationships with the NHS exec, and not least of all to try and pool resources in taking forward some of these strategic priorities. So that will be a relationship that we continue to forge moving forward. And equity and accessibility and equality, absolutely fundamentally critical to the centre of any development of our strategy. So yeah, we aren't going to be able to capture everything in one slide, but really helpful that I've heard all of that from everybody and pick it up and progress it as we go on.
And can we just go back onto the next slide in terms of timeline? That's okay. And so again, just to make sure we're comfortable with that in terms of the key deliverables and that we know them when the JCC is going to be engaged and consulted as part of the development of the strategy. My sense that's very sensible, and it's good to see that in advance, to be frank, because sometimes you don't. It almost sort of sits into an ether, but I think it's useful just to make sure that's there. Hayley, did you have a point?
No, that's sorry. Apologies. I'm fine. Thanks.
Right. Okay, so we'd ask to note the slide deck. George, have you got one on the conversation?
I have. It's been very helpful. As I say, the more formal engagement will take place over the coming weeks and months. But no, that's been really helpful to make sure that at least we kick off in the right frame.
Thank you very much. We now move on to another report from you, which is in terms of delivering the current plan, which is the Foundation Plan Implementation Framework.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, again, mindful of time, it is for noting, we obviously approved the Foundation Plan back at the last committee meeting, and this now is how we're going to implement it. So it's hopefully an assurance report for you. We've aligned all of the strategic priority areas to each of the outputs and deliverables within the work plans that were in the Foundation Plan. So the construct really is illustrated at a very high level at the top of page 5 in that diagram, where we've got for every strategic priority, we've got outcomes, deliverables and milestones. The milestones are split to quarterly deliverables. That will be built into our quarterly performance reporting and the commissioning reports if we need to do anything else by exception. So the monitoring and delivery and the management of risk, that section, we are reliant on health board colleagues to work with us on this. So we have got CCLG leads for each of these areas. We are going to be engaging with chief executive leads for each of these areas as well. So watch this space, but we have already started to have individual meetings with CCLG leads. I'm very grateful for their support on each of these strategic areas. So I'm hoping that the report is self-explanatory. I don't intend to read through it, but happy to take any thoughts or comments. Sorry, Chair, the only other thing I would say is the appendix. Apologies in advance. There is a problem in getting Excel onto admin control. So it does look a bit clunky and hard to navigate. I'm more than happy to provide the source document if anybody needs it. And I should have pointed out as well, there is a typo. I've talked about a 61% capacity that we're running at. Actually, it's a 29% vacancy rate. So I obviously had to struggle with my maths there. So it should be a 29% vacancy rate we're currently running at. So it's mindful of the resources that are available at the current time.
Great, thank you. And what I didn't see it initially in the report was the timescales, but I noticed they were in the appendix. And I think that helps in terms of just understanding prioritisation. We're going to be really clear in terms of what we're going to be in a position to achieve and when, and what are the key and the biggest priorities for us. I think the other thing for that I'm very keen to, I was pleased to see, was around both JCC leadership but also health board leadership as well, and making sure you've got somebody accountable for driving this forward, because that sense of drive and focus and rigour is going to be really important at the end of this.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, really, I suppose, there's a lot in the implementation plan just in business as usual on top of the 8 strategic priorities that I suppose we agreed. And I suppose the point of highlighting around the implementation of our current recovery from our current capacity is a significant issue going into this year, and I don't want to underestimate it. The conversation that I've had with the team is about, so, you know, if we only had to prioritise 5 things, what are the 5 things that we are going to be prioritising? And I think in some of that, I've clearly heard from the Joint Committee that there are some priorities in neonatal cardiac, the cardiac review, and the development of our strategy to enable us to get into an IMTP place. So it is important, I suppose, that we get the support from the committee and colleagues, because we may have to reach out for that additional capacity from people in health board land to be able to help us to deliver on some of these priorities. Just thinking about how we bring some of that together throughout the next 12 months, if you like.
And I'll bring Susan in. But the other question for me is, with us holding quite a large number of vacancies at a senior level, how is that going to impact upon our ability to deliver what we've already said is ambitious And is there any other way of accessing resource while we go through that recruitment process?
Yeah, and I know Hugh is having some conversations with colleagues as well around what that support may or may not look like. But it is an important point, particularly in of the risk that's inherent that sits within the plan anyway.
But we've definitely got to do it because we've made it really, particularly the around those 4 areas: cardiac, neonatal, ambulance, mental health. Are areas we know are the areas where there's most opportunity, but also most risk. And we need to be quite laser-like, I think, in our focus and making sure that as a committee we're getting the levels of assurance that we need around those areas. Susan, then Hayley.
Thank you, Chair. George, I just wonder, of course, on the first page of the implementation framework, and you indeed have already mentioned it in relation to the previous item. When will we decide whether it's going to be a 5-year or 10-year strategy?
So that will be part of the engagement to determine the timescales. So yeah, it'll be an explicit question of the committee, I guess. Yeah.
Hayley?
Yeah, thank you, Stacey, on the point around just recognising the capacity that we need to deliver this year, the current plan and the inherent risks to that. But I just had a point just in relation to delivery confidence. I think there's something for me about whether we're also having a discussion, because there wasn't explicitly, perhaps I've missed it, I don't think so, but in terms of the Ministerial Advisory Group, clearly there were a large number of recommendations, and that was also about the refocusing of the capacity nationally in the executive. And I just wondered whether there's an explicit conversation around the importance of delivering the JCC's plan in relation to supporting all of us to deliver for Wales, for the population, whether there's an explicit conversation taking place around the refocusing of the executive. Because again, when I mentioned local, regional, national, there may be, in terms of maximum impact, some discussions we may want to have around some key enablers to support us, particularly with the vacancies you're carrying in the JCC, to ensure that we can deliver this year's plan.
Yeah, and thank you, Hayley. And there is a conversation ongoing with Welsh Government around an MOU between us, Welsh Government, and the NHS Executive. But there's clearly synergies between the work of the networks and the work that needs to be undertaken as part of the strategy. That makes complete sense for us to do that collectively and together. So while we're having a discussion around the SLT table in our team, is how do we make sure that those networks are more interlinked with our commissioning teams that are quite similar in focus. So yeah, and it doesn't stop there. You go into the benchmarking agenda. I know they've got access to NHS benchmarking and so on and so forth. So there's a huge synergy in work plans. So those conversations are ongoing. They probably need to happen quicker. We need to land something a lot more solid than we have done to date, but definitely ongoing.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, so a couple of things for me. I guess there's definitely something about how we can be more proactive, maybe about promoting opportunities within our own organisations for people to spend time or have secondments into the JCC, because I think it's a big opportunity for people to broaden their skills and experience. So I just wonder whether there's something about whether we need to get our workforce colleagues to be working alongside you, Stacey and George and others, just to sort of look to see how we promote some of these opportunities and make them seen as attractive propositions for people to go and develop their skills, which they can then bring back in time into our organisations. And just my second point was about that point about interfacing with the exec and government. I guess, just to remind ourselves, I suppose, that we are a collective of health boards here. So we need to be careful, I guess, that we don't the agendas that are coming through from government aren't guiding some of the resource allocations, and that we need to make sure that, I'm all for trying to engage and involve the networks in the conversations, but networks will often have one perspective of what they're trying to achieve, whereas there's a slightly different ask that we're looking to do from a commissioning perspective. So very much see the need to try and drive synergies in there, but also wanted to make sure that we keep the focus on the priorities that we as an organisation and a collective of health boards have set ourselves. And I'm just thinking, I had a conversation last week with Hugh about the maternity neonatal work, which, you know, has been a priority for us for a long time, but hasn't progressed at all because we just haven't been able to source capacity. So I think it's just about being really clear what it is we're asking the networks to do, because candidly, some of the networks I would suggest have colleagues who are very keen to develop and grow services. Whereas actually what we're needing people to do is take a more objective perspective on what's the strategic direction for that service and where and how do we prioritise the resources that are available to deliver it.
George, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so it's like taking the units. It's vitally important that the scoping document that we're putting together for the strategic priority area for that it is signed off possibly by the joint committee. So at the moment it's being developed in collaboration with the CCLG leads. It will obviously then be socialised with the CCLG more widely than that. But I do think it probably needs to come back to the joint committee, because it's vitally important that we're really clear on the problem we're trying to solve and the outcome that we're looking for as part of that, so that we can focus and we've got that ownership, and then linking with the networks to find out how they can contribute to that. But the ownership needs to sit with us and make sure that that's within our gift.
Okay. Any other comments, Mandy?
Yeah, 2 points. I'm really pleased to see the reference to a maturity matrix, particularly in the context of Centre of Excellence. I think that's going to be really, really helpful. On a much more practical level, I suppose, the link between, and we've had this discussion briefly and we've acknowledged it, between the aspirations within the strategy or the plans moving forward and the link to capital, and how that impacts then on overall delivery of the priorities that we've got, and just being clear about, have we got those links robust enough, and is there more that we can be doing as a JCC?
Yeah, so I've got a meeting arranged, or to be arranged, with Welsh Government to talk about sort of where, just to talk about capital more broadly, where we commission services. The role for us is really clearly in that revenue space, isn't it? But inevitably, I mean, yeah, there's I can list a handful of them now just off the top of my head, where there's capital constraints to us being able to commission in the way that we would like to. So yeah, we do need to keep that conversation live. I'm mindful of boundaries and so on and so forth, but there is an issue where capital is prioritised, which means that our work plan gets held up by some of the decisions made more nationally, if you like.
I guess there's an advocacy role, isn't there, for us in terms of that we're hampered in terms of some of our clinical opportunities by a lack of capital for providers.
Yeah.
And our health board colleagues will say, how can we be in a position to help to influence that? Because I think you're absolutely right, Mandy. It's one of the biggest risks, I would say. Susan.
Just I'm thinking Hayley and I were on the same table at the Cabinet Sec 29th of April event in relation to the Ministerial Advisory Group recommendations and Cabinet Secretary's response. But of course, there was a clear focus there, and in terms of the recommendations about regions and capital as levers for change. And so I think there are opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's been a really helpful discussion. Just in terms of some reflections, what I've heard is there's something about, and this does this, but again, a clearer, just a reminder to us about this. It's going to require even further prioritisation, I think, in terms of what can be delivered. There are issues then around resource, and what resource do we need, holding vacancies to deliver the implementation framework, but also importantly as well, how we're going to deliver some of this at pace, acknowledging what are the priorities for us and how they might interface with the broader policies for government and the executive, and making sure there's that clarity around what's important for us as the joint committee of the 7 health boards to deliver for our population, and getting that balance right is going to be really key. George, does that give you sort of, again, is that helpful in terms of as you and senior colleagues start to implement the plan in terms of the sort of thinking from the JCC?
It is, and as I say, we'll make sure that we report quarterly back, and by exception where necessary, but hopefully we'll have that assurance that we are delivering against the quarterly milestone.
Because I think it's really important if there are issues, if around those areas which we prioritise, sort of the really key areas, if things are slipping or there are barriers or delays, I'd be very keen to make sure these are brought back to us early so we can help unblock rather than it just gets to a stage where actually we're running out of time.
Yeah, we are making sure that we've got a programme wrap around this. So the limited resources we do have, it's absolutely on the priority for them to make sure that we have got that programme wrap and the reporting associated with that so that we've got the assurance that you need.
Right. Thank you very much. So we note the reports and the recommendations. Thank you very much. Moving on then to looking back, financial performance report for month 12 and operational report for month 12. We do the two together.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Really helpful. So I'll take both reports as read. They are the final month 12 positions from last year. So the financial position ended the year at a £6.987 million overspend. That was largely supported by Welsh Government funding mid-year. They didn't actually come in until quite late in the year. The Joint Committee will know that there were several presentations in relation to the recovery of the overspend position last year. A number of those actions did take place, but unfortunately didn't get us down below the sort of £7 million line finalising the year last year, but did sort of mitigate any risk that we had beyond that. In relation to the operational performance report, just to note this month that what we have tried to do is just bring together and combine basically the performance against the plan and the operational performance report. And as a starter for 10, just to bring down last year to a close, but then also to think about what this report looks like for this year being truly integrated. It's going to take us a little bit of time to get there. And I know we keep on having the conversations, but this really needs to be prioritised. And it is a priority of the team, but we do need to bring this into an integrated performance report for this year. And we'll pick that up with the PPF committee too, the Planning, Performance and Finance Committee too. Just, if I may, just pull out two things. So 7 services in escalation, one of which is in Welsh Government escalation. There's also an issue with bariatric surgery in Salford that due to sort of non-recovery of the performance issue that may go back into escalation. Plastic surgery in South Wales. The provider did secure Welsh Government funding to recover as much as they possibly could the waiting times. That didn't get us fully into a recoverable position, and trajectory for this year without additional funding looks like we'll be again in a breach position as far as the 52-week target is concerned. And the only other one I was going to pick out was PET, just in relation to the conversation that we had last time. So we know that there was an issue with some of the PSMA supply. That issue has now been resolved, and we also tried to put in some resilience with the Taunton pathway through Swansea. However, that did create a bit of a waiting time issue of around 6 weeks during that time, with the target to be in 10 days. To the best of my knowledge, and Yolo isn't on the call, but that position has more or less been recovered. But we are keeping a close eye on it, making sure that we've got some resilience in our PET services going forward.
Any comments or observations on the integrated operation report or the non-integrated operation report?
Yeah, just wondered, probably picking up the plastic surgery 104-week issue. And again, Abby, I don't know where the discussions with Welsh Government are, or through the JCC really, is in terms of, it was a big focus, the amount of effort we're putting on all our other specialties. And, you know, just because they sit in the JCC territory shouldn't mean it's not part of the same scrutiny and prioritisation. So I just wonder where that conversation is, because and it is that is it part of the conversation or not?
Yeah, so we are having performance discussions with the provider, you know, both in North Wales and in South Wales on a regular basis. What I would say is there is a wider issue around plastic surgeries and where the active commission is because of the decision around whether it being specialist or not. And I think previously we've decided that it's not. whilst this sits in our contract, we just want to be aligned with the provider in terms of any application of funding that's available from Welsh Government, just to make sure that we're aligned on it. And we are still trying to keep a regular beat on the performance. However, we do need to come to a conclusion this year, I think, in terms of whether plastic surgery is handed back from a specialised services perspective, just because of the focus and the resource that needs to go into this to enable it to get into a better position, given the breadth of the rest of the conversation that we've had around the risks in the plan, really.
Is that another issue it's tried to our list of priorities? Sounds like it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and again, that's that whole focus in terms of that there are a number of services which we need to spend time reviewing or having conversations with providers, but also using our authority as a commissioner in order to drive performance standards, acknowledging some of those challenges and making sure we're doing that in a way that is fulfilling the responsibilities that we have, but also supportive of the provider. Getting that balance right is really a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
When actually your commission levers are actually reasonably limited, particularly in a system where we've got a smaller system where there actually is, we acknowledge that we're commissioning often fragile services, which are going to be fragile. So, and goes back to those issues about choice that we need to take collectively. So I think that's probably another conversation for a development session where we can start to just reflect back in terms of what's important to us as a JCC and important for the population that we're commissioned on behalf of.
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly on the plastic, we would really welcome getting that resolved early because last year it was a very end of the year activity. We probably didn't get as much value as we could have done. I'm aware that we're delivering against the current contract, and yet that's not going to be enough to fully deliver. So just if there's anything you need, Stacey, that you're not getting in terms of that commissioning conversation, to make sure that's aligned with the conversation we're having with Welsh Government about planned care and waiting times, resources, then just let me know. Okay.
I wonder whether we could take this into the mix of fragile services, a conversation we've had already as part of the strategy conversation, and make sure that we're building time as a JCC to have those broader, wider, but really important conversation. Anything else on the?
Yeah, just 2 points, sorry. The cardiac, obviously the cardiac is part of the priority review, so I think we've got a number of cardiac issues from AB, but they can all be picked up as part of that in terms of, again, long waiting lists with underperformance and recognising that's the switch. The other one, I suppose, just links it briefly into the conversation I was having on the strategy and whether or not we should be into prevention or further upstream. But the bariatric surgery, which is a growing problem, isn't it? And all the opportunities now around weight loss medication, which is mentioned in. But, we do need to start where we tried. So whilst I don't think prevention is the business of this committee in totality, at a service level, it's important we look at the whole pathway and the options. Yeah. And I just don't know where the work is on that, because there's quite a significant pressure on bariatric services, and it's not in the priority list, but where is that work happening?
Yeah,
where we can look
so
at alternatives.
There was a conversation with Public Health Wales around what that pathway should actually look like and whether we are going to invest value for it, because in reality it's a tiny service for the population sort of prevalence that we need to treat. So the point is really well made, though, because so whilst I don't think prevention is our work, there's secondary care prevention that probably is, but in the true sense of it, the reality is there are some services that evidence would show you give them the specialist services whilst more expensive earlier on, their total patient pathway is a lot more manageable, a lot more sustainable and financially effective. The alternative to that is we are far better off pushing that funding left street to be managed in prevention of the services. And it's how we systematically approach some of that, because I think the default through some of the unintended decision making across different parts of the pathway means that sometimes they end up in very expensive treatment. Yeah. It's actually not even
writing letters to patients saying it's a 5 to 8 year waiting list to get on waiting medication. Yeah. We're only prioritising people who may be waiting for cancer treatment or something like that, and yet I'm throwing money into a specialist centre for surgery where I could possibly avoid them being in that position. Yeah, and yet we're not joining up those conversations, because we've got the staff to potentially do some of this, which the medication and all of, is quite expensive. So
that's groundbreaking.
It feels like it's a real opportunity that we shouldn't leave too long while we're working on the other areas.
My own view is that actually we're all in this is prevention.
Yeah.
So in terms of the whole of the health economy needs to be, it's about making sure that we're commissioning that approach of saying, is there a better solution that may need some initial resource and getting a systems response rather than, as you say, just pouring money into something which actually is a better solution. Susan.
Just in terms of triangulating some of the earlier conversations from Ross from his report, in terms of the if I've understood you right, Ross, in terms of the ability of ambulance vehicles and the requirement perhaps to just transport individuals and clearly there are issues in terms of populations who are and trying to be sensitive in terms of how I describe individuals who might benefit from weight loss surgery.
Yeah.
That's
yeah, I mean, as I said, there's a whole change in pattern of mobility for ambulances, some of which may implicate by that, and we'd have to do the detailed analysis of the drivers behind.
Okay, so I think let's note the report, and there are a number of actions which we've already discussed that have been flagged by the operational report, which will be either built into the development of the strategy or that wider focus around some of the priorities for this year.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then to. I'll take a break shortly, but just a very quick break, a comfort break. But can we just deal first of all with the Joint Commissioning Committee scheme of reservation delegation of powers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To set the scene, the 7 health boards approved the NHS Wales Joint Commissioning Committee standing orders, the scheme of reservation and delegation of powers, and the standing financial instructions at their respective board meetings back in March 2024, prior to the establishment of the JCC on the 1st of April 2024. So thereafter, the new Joint Committee then adopted the documents at its inaugural meeting on the 9th of April 2024, and they were included as a schedule to each of the health board's own standing orders and have effect as if incorporated within them. So Appendix 1 refers to that. The Joint Committee also approved the Transitional Delegated Financial Authorisation Matrix at that time. So at that time, it was also recognised that the documents would need to be updated further during the transition phase to reflect the developments concerning delegated matters to the JCC, the Chief Commissioner, Directors and the new subcommittees as established. In addition to the responsibilities delegated to the JCC, the Chief Commissioner also has delegated responsibilities from the host body, which is set out within the hosting agreement, and delegated responsibilities from Welsh Government, which is set out in an accountable officer memorandum. So in developing the documents, we've mapped out all of the governance and compliance and delegations into one document, which is presented as the scheme of reservation and delegation of powers to the Chief Commissioner at Appendix 2. A lot of work has gone into it. As I say, we had to map it out because it is a complex governance framework, different to other NHS bodies. So that is there for completeness. In addition, as a hosted body, we're required to adhere to additional delegations emanating from the CWMTAV additional delegations appended to their standing financial instructions. So that's presented at Appendix 3. The updated financial authorisation matrix is presented at Appendix 4. And finally, the handling of interest guidance, which was originally approved prior to the establishment of the JCC, is presented at Appendix 5. And this is quite an important document because it's going to support budget holders and understanding their roles as budget holders to support compliance with the SFIs and the scheme of delegation. And that's it. I think the report is read, Jeff.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I'm not there. Really important that we are regularly updating this and keeping this under constant review on at least an annual basis. No questions. Can we approve the recommendations on block? Great, thank you very much. Let's have just a 5-minute comfort break. So back at 12:10.
Salary in it.
But it is once, isn't it? That's it, at the end.
Okay, can we reconvene, please? Thank you very much for that, coming back on time. You'll be pleased to know we've caught up on time, which is positive. We're now moving on to Matthew Bunce, who's Director of Finance and Berlin. You're welcome to the JCC, Matthew. And there's an item on our agenda that has come, I think, from Berlin in relation to recover plasma from whole blood donations for medicine. Matthew, assume we've read the report. Is there anything in particular you wish to bring out to our attention?
Oh, thanks, Chair. I can give you a bit of the governance history if you wanted, but I don't know how much you know, so I'm probably best to just open it up to questions. And really, it's about the recommendations. There's two simple asks, which are seeking the JCC's approval to use the whole blood plasma collected for immunoglobulin and albumin manufacture, and then also to permit Valindra to use the savings from the price reduction through the Octapharma UK contract to fund the additional costs and the lost income. But I'll open, I'm happy to take questions really on any detail.
So Matthew, as I read this, that there is no then financial implications currently for any of the health boards in relation to this decision. So there is a potentially a financial benefit that could come from the health boards down the line. Is that a fair reading of the paper?
That's correct. Valindra wanted to press ahead. It's the right thing to do with bearing the financial risk on the small part year additional costs. We are hoping to see whether the Welsh Government will provide some funding, and we will let obviously the committee know if that happens. But yes, there's no cost to health boards.
Thank you. Any questions or observations, Susan?
Excuse me, Matthew, if this is a very simplistic question, are there any risks being run to individuals in relation?
No, I mean, in terms of the process that will be followed for collection of whole blood, nothing changes. We're already collecting whole blood. The plasma is currently a byproduct of that collection and is distributed at the moment to diagnostic companies for research. So there's no real impact or change to the patient. When we move on to phase 2, hopefully we will, which is apheresis collection of plasma, there are obviously associated clinical risks with that process.
Phil.
Yeah, that was sort of similar to my question about from a clinical perspective, there's no risks. I think that's what you're saying. And also, is it in line with what would be accepted practice across the rest of the UK, for example?
Yeah, so I should sort of say, obviously, with any, even just whole blood collection, there's risk. But what I'm saying is there's no change in the risk because of this case. There's an element of risk there. UK-wide, England are already receiving supplies of immunoglobulin and albumin through the Octapharma contract. So they've been stockpiling and then supplying plasma for the past 12 months. Scotland have just gone through their due diligence process. So in the paper, it talks about a 7-month period to get ourselves quality assured with Octapharma, and Northern Ireland are about to start that path. So across the UK, other nations are already doing this, or in the process of doing this.
Any other questions or comments? I understand there's been conversations amongst chief executives about this, and so it's my understanding. So hence, but it needs to come here from a formal decision. Are we happy to approve the recommendations? That's agreed. Matthew, thank you very much for your time today. Nice to meet you.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Moving on then to, we've dealt with the individual patient funding request policy, and we've now we've dealt with the item in terms of whole blood. Now moving on to improving patient flow oversight and repatriation in mental health hospitals. Adrian, again, anything you wish to tease out to us?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the paper as read. This was something that was discussed in the strategy meeting last month. There was appetite in that meeting to reducing the length of stay or the notification period for delayed transfers of care. I don't know if we discussed that meeting about expanding to other commissioned services by the JCC, so eating disorders, neuropsychiatry, etc. So the ask is to approve the reduction in the notification period and to expand to the mental health services commissioned by JCC.
Right, and good to see that this report has come so quickly following the conversations that took place at the development session. Any questions, comments? No? I think we had the conversation at the development session, so we're happy to agree to the recommendations. But when will they be implemented then?
I've got the mental health commissioners meeting with the health boards on the 11th of June, so I'll discuss it in there. We'll probably need to update our detox policy as well. So it's probably going to be a month or so, to be honest.
Time sounds like. Right, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing that to us so quickly. Moving on then to the risk register.
Just closing the windows.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, this is the routine risk register received at each meeting. The position as at 31st of March, there are 13 risks with a score of 15 or above, comprising of 12 commissioning risks and 1 organisational risk. In terms of movement, 1 new risk has been added, risk 79, type A, aortic dissection. 1 risk has been de-escalated, risk 34, lack of paediatric intensive care beds. And 1 risk has been closed, risk 76, financial break-even. And just to give assurance, a new financial risk will be added in April for the financial year 25-26, which will be included on the risk register presented to the July meeting. Just to advise, this report does outline the position as at 31st of March, and a number of activities did occur in April, which will enable us to review and adjust some of the risk ratings and mitigation plans for some of the risks. To ensure that members are kept fully updated, some of the issues were covered in Ross's report earlier, but I don't know, Ross, if there's anything else you wanted to add.
No, I guess just to manage expectations, so in terms of the highest risk in relation to utilisation of ambulance commission capacity, the inclusion of the recommendation within the MAG for handover, the development of health board level single point of access, and I guess linked also to the ambulance services new performance framework and the actions that the organisation will take operationally to deliver that, combined will likely manifest in our ability to reduce that risk, but I guess we will need to reduce that risk at the point in time where we see a manifest change in operational performance.
There's an emerging plan and trajectory in order which addresses the risk and seeks to mitigate the risk, which should enable us at some point to reduce the potential impact. Is outlined in our current risk register.
And linked to the conversation we had earlier about the JCC's strategic ambition for 1 month and the opportunities that has to manage activity more effectively.
Any questions or comments?
Okay, just one thing to add. The report makes reference to the risk appetite statement on the JCC strategy session in June. Mandy alluded to it earlier. Just to confirm, it will be covered in Q3 towards the end of the year to align with the JCC strategy once it's developed. Thank you.
Thank you. So we note that report, and then we now move on to the corporate governance report. Again, Jackie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is a comprehensive report, so I was going to take it as read and only focus on the key areas that require noting or approval. So members will be aware there is the annual wave of reporting on governance and compliance, and this report presents a number of key documents to demonstrate assurance. The first one, the accountability report. The draft is presented in Appendix 1, and this is due to be presented to the CTMU Audit and Risk Committee on the 22nd of May as part of their draft accounts and annual report. The final documents will be presented to the Audit and Risk Committee on the 25th of June, and that will go through for board approval on the 26th of June, prior to being submitted to Audit Wales and Welsh Government. And then the AGM for Cwmtaf is the 31st of July, so it will also be included on that agenda. So the Joint Committee asked to approve the draft accountability report today for inclusion in the Cwmtaf annual report. And it's important to note that advice received from Audit Wales has stipulated that it should be a two-part accountability report for Cwmtaf, and other hosted organisation under Cwmtaf we feature as part 2. So part 1 is for Paul as in his capacity as Chief Executive, provide assurance on CTM. Part 2 is for Hugh George as Chief Commissioner and Accountable Officer for the NWJCC to provide assurance on our work. So that report is comprehensive and it's there for assurance and approval today. You have to just run through, yeah. Just in terms of the standing orders, Health Board colleagues will be aware that Welsh Government issued a Welsh Health Circular back in March, amending the standing model orders for Health Boards, trusts and special health authorities, stating that all board papers must be published at least 5 clear days before a formal board meeting, as opposed to the 7 calendar days. Unfortunately, Welsh Government didn't update the model standing orders for us. And discussions are ongoing with Welsh Government in this regard. However, in the meantime, it's suggested that as a subcommittee of the 7 health boards, we as the Joint Committee endorse that we adhere to the new time frame for issuing the papers. So currently our standing orders say 7 clear days, and we change this to 5 clear days to align with the new model for other NHS bodies. And this will be formally adopted when we receive the new Welsh Government model standing orders.
Nia.
Yes, what does that mean, 5 clear days as opposed to 7 calendar days? What do you mean? Are these I think we had slightly this discussion in yesterday's meeting a little bit, but I still don't understand. So could you tell me, please? Are weekends included, that type of thing?
Thank you, Nia. Valid question. Following our discussion yesterday, we did seek clarification, and it does include the weekend. It has to be 5 clear days to the meeting. So that's what we were advised yesterday. And I will get this in writing, but it was a conversation yesterday. Clear days does include the weekend.
So say we got them on say it was a Monday, right? And then the clear days are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then if the meeting was the following Monday, which it wouldn't be, that would be okay. Yeah? So we'd have to get them. It's the same thing, actually, isn't it?
It is.
And we can endorse it as much as we like. It didn't happen, though, did it?
No, we did breach it on this occasion due to the volume of the pages, but but
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's all very well saying, oh, well, take all these things as read, which they have been because people have worked over weekends and whatnot doing it. But if there are going to be lots of things taken as read, the sooner we get them, the better, if you want us to read them. I know I've made this point before. You must get really fed up of me. You can throw darts at a picture of me if you like, but I'm going to keep saying it, though. It's kind of unreasonable, really. The ask is, well, it's not unreasonable. Well, maybe it is. I feel that it is. Okay, thank you.
I think two reflections from my perspective is that there's a standing orders, and it makes sense that we follow the standing orders that have been established for the other health boards. But then there's also in terms of what we believe is good practice for us. And I think that it's about making sure that that we are being really clear in terms of what sort of information is necessary for the committee to have in order to exercise its responsibilities. And again, it's something I was going to reflect on when we come to the feedback from the committee. Is there was a huge amount of paperwork at this meeting, and was that all necessary in order to fulfil our governance responsibilities? So that's a question mark. And secondly, even if it is 7 days, the sooner we can publish the papers and get it to lay members and chief executives who are needing to digest a lot of information, the better, because that enables us to have better decision making. So I think, Nia, I agree with your point in terms of that we want as much time as possible, but I'm also saying let's stick to the standard terms of reference that gives the minimum. and then we need to ensure we stick by the minimum, but we want custom practice to be we give more time for people, if that helps. Any other issues in terms of the actual papers, Jackie? Okay, so we've got a range of documents we've been asked to approve and recommendations. Are we happy to approve them all on block? Seeing no dissenting voices, so they're approved. Thank you very much. We now move on to dealt with Blue Tech. Highlights from the subcommittee. Susan, anything you wish to add?
I chaired it. No, and to be honest, it was a good meeting. I think probably one of the things that I would pull out, we did see the patient story, which was incredibly powerful on the day, because actually Jess appeared in person, and that makes, you know, on screen in person, but makes a huge difference, I think. And it's really pleasing to see that a number of the actions that we flagged have actually been progressed as well. The one thing I would say is I have made a plea to the writers of the report, and I've had a brief conversation with George about how we make sure that we focus the reports on quality and outcomes. So I think that would be something going forward that the subcommittee will progress.
Very much. Any questions? Phil?
Yeah, just to agree with what Mandy said. I think we did touch on the point about equity. I think John mentioned that earlier, and also maybe Nicola, I'm not sure. But anyway, we talked about equity and realised that just how that pervades almost the experience of every patient that or person that accesses these services, because often they are centralised due to the nature. So I think you were right, Chair, to bring that up earlier, and we'll be continuing to pursue that through this committee.
Thanks, Phil. I think we'll move on to Paul. Is that the finance?
Thanks, Chair. Taking as read. Just highlight a couple of brief things. We've talked in this meeting about keeping risks on the agenda, on two of the and that was certainly something we picked up in the subcommittee. Particularly, we discussed around the plastic surgery and ambulance services as well. And I think that's critical. So part of one of the key focuses of the committee is about providing assurance sort of ahead, so we can bring things to this committee. So keeping an eye on the risks, I think, is going to be a fairly key part of the committee's work.
Thank you. Any questions, Paul? Okay, thank you. Then we've got the report that's fed back from the IPFR panel. Any questions?
No question. It's really a comment, because I think we were having the conversation earlier about how we understand the impact and outcomes. Obviously, we've got a solution, but I'm fairly sure that I read in the papers around the IPFR about the need for it to go to health board quality committees as well. And I'm just thinking back to my time, and I'm not sure that I did see it at that particular, sorry, Phil, that particular quality committee, but it is a way of helping us make sure that when we look at it, and I was thinking, and I haven't spoken to Susan about this, but how we can take that through our Quality Safety Outcomes Committee as well.
Yeah.
So that rather than having a detailed discussion here, it goes through the quality route. Understanding the financial impact, that might be inappropriate. So I just mentioned that.
I think that we perhaps could have a bit of time spent in thinking about what we need to see as a JCC from what actually is a significant decision-making body that's delegated authority on our behalf, and whether what we're getting currently is what we need moving forward. So let's just, I don't think we come to a view now, but let's just have a bit of a reflection on that. Yes, and the other question for me on this report is, we've got some lay member vacancies. Have they been advertised currently?
I think they have, haven't they? I think I saw something. Maybe wrong.
So I think I think I've asked a question on the lay member.
On the IPFR panel.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the advert today.
I think we need to press on and prioritise that.
So I've raised a question on it, and it's about the appropriateness of us advertising lay members that I just want to circle back around to.
Right.
It doesn't feel like it's a JCC team thing to be doing, although I appreciate that's how it's been done before, and I think that needs to be answered before we progress.
Right, so we'll get to a swift solution on that.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. And then the Welsh Kidney Network. It's just say that Hugh and I have had a number of conversations with Ian Phillips, current chair of the Welsh Kidney Network. There is a review currently concluding around governance, and that I presume will come back to a meeting, probably our next meeting, I would imagine.
Yes.
So that's in the context of a number of conversations with them. But again, it's a useful report.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really useful summary. I'm conscious of the fact that it's highlighting a couple of potential risks in there, particularly around finance. Are they included? I can't remember whether they're included in our risk register or on our radar.
Specifically relating to Welsh Kidney Network.
Yeah.
There are.
Yeah.
If we pick up a conversation after the meeting, I can.
They have to. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all of the feedback from the committee. Any other business that hasn't been on the agenda or notified? Thank you. Reflections on the meeting? Any sort of either comments about the meeting itself or the process of preparation for the meeting? If we can stop recording, that'd be great. Dr. Az.